Welcome to another episode on the Journeyman Co. Hello, buddy. Good to see you.
How's it, buddy?
Yeah. So today we've got a really special guest. An absolute honor to be speaking to Mr. Gavin Cowley, legendary commentator, voted or considered Grey High School's most talented sportsman.
Yeah.
Rugby, cricket, hockey. The man does it all. So it's going to be great to speak to him this evening. And like I said, obviously, to all the people that are watching, please continue to like and subscribe, and we appreciate all your support as we bring you more interesting and insightful conversations from just incredible people. So good to see
Yeah,
you.
I mean, Mike, it's the voice of our childhood, you know. You're thinking about those days at Newlands and with the Springboks in '95. The guy's a incredible commentator, incredible sportsman, knowledge, articulate. So I can't wait to chat to him. It's for me personally, it's a little bit of a something close to home, I would say. You know, when you think of a rugby game, you think of Gavin Cowley, pack of peanuts and a bit of biltong. They're sitting there watching Saturday afternoon ruggers. But this is incredible. We're going to go through his journey. We're going to listen and talk to him about Springbok rugby. I mean, he's been through it all. You must remember, from the '70s into what he's seeing now and commentating now. He's at a front row seat.
Yeah.
He's worked with some of the greatest Springboks and he's commentated with some of the greatest Springboks of all time. So this is a real honor, and I must actually thank you and your father for organizing this. It must be an Eastern Cape thing. So Fires, thank you for hooking us up with this. It's incredible that you have these connections and networks. And I'm so proud to share this with everyone. So let's get into it. Let's go. Let's get it, boys.
Okay, so welcome everybody to another episode of the Journeyman Co. Myself, Jeff, are so honored to bring you Mr. Gavin Cowley.
Yes.
Or widely considered Grey High School's, most talented sportsman, for what he could do across the board with rugby, cricket, field hockey. But it's so nostalgic for us to have you, Gav. Jeff and I were saying just before you came on, you kind of like part of our pop culture nostalgic memory bank, because when we were growing up in the 90s watching Curry Cup, your voice was synonymous with
Yeah.
Western Province Stormers and rugby in South Africa. So it's such a massive honor to have someone like you on here. The list of accolades is endless. From junior Springboks to being a part of the Springbok team of the '70s to playing provincial cricket to taking 6 for 32 in a Gillette final, I believe. And then obviously your history with Adidas, and you one of the most legendary commentators in South African rugby. I believe you also commentated on the '95 Rugby World Cup final. So that's quite a special thing. So thanks for giving us your time. We're really looking forward to chatting to you, learning from you, and seeing what comes out of the wash, I guess. So welcome to our podcast.
Thanks very much, Michael and Jeff. Yeah, of course. I thought you might have had a little bit of a Geordie accent by now, but you haven't, Michael.
No, it's well, I think I've got to understand them first to be able to have that accent.
Yeah.
So, no, well, I've only been in Newcastle, just over a year. So thankfully I've kept my South African accent. Well, I've been in the UK since 2015 after
Yeah.
after the Kings went into administration, and then
Yeah.
brief stint back after Wasps went into administration. But thankfully, I think I've kept my South African accent intact.
Eastern Cape boy key. You keep it real, man. You keep it real, my
Well,
It's like
the key question is, have you been to St. James Park?
No, I haven't. It's very hard to get tickets to watch Newcastle, and obviously at the moment they're flying. They've got the Arab money, and they're building something really special. I can hear the singing from my bedroom.
Really?
So, yeah. No, it's close, bro. It's like a solid 5 iron over the suburbs. Yeah, I reckon I could.
That's crazy, actually. Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty central in Newcastle.
Yeah.
I'm in a neighborhood called Sandyford, Gav, and it's quite a. Have you been to Newcastle?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite a small little city, but it's lekker, man, and starting to get cold now, boys. Yeah.
Mikey, I can see something else that you've picked up there in Newcastle is the boxing, because you got a little blue eye there again.
Yeah,
You've been doing a bit of boxing. Tell the
no,
boys how that's going. I mean, you've been bobbing and weaving.
This is from yesterday. So obviously the team, the club I coach up in Anik, they asked me to sit on the bench, and I obviously haven't played since I tore my MCL against Northampton in February. So I've obviously been training really hard, and I said to them, okay, I'll play 15 minutes off the bench. And this is just amateur club rugby, it's lacquer. I ended up going on after 15 minutes, but yeah, the body was not ready for 65, but it was fun. Came on, scored 2 quick tries off the back of a rolling maul, which seems to be my specialty. But yeah, no, it's lacquer playing with. I mean, Gav, you'll know all about like amateur rugby, and you come from, that kind of era, so you've seen it all, really.
Yeah.
And, it's an interesting place to kind of cut your teeth as a coach and a player. I mean, what was the amateur era like back in the 70s when you like kind of came out of school into the EP setup and into the Springbok setup? What was that like?
Yeah, it was quite a rush, in fact, in many ways, because I hadn't played a lot of provincial rugby when I was picked in the Springbok squad. But it was, yeah, I mean, you guys would laugh at the way that we used to prepare for games. So we'd practice on a Tuesday and a Thursday. You'd run twice around the field, then maybe run through the tires a few times, and then you'd like get on with it and play, So, I mean, you guys are just, well, I think I know what you guys go through, because I've seen those ice baths and all those other strange things that we never had those things, So yeah, it was an interesting introduction for me, It was sort of like 2 years after I'd left school. And I was still very young and struggling somewhat to adapt to some of the rugby there, because a lot of the guys that I played with were Afrikaans speaking, and they'd like say to me in my debut, in fact, for EP was against Lancashire, who were touring at the time. And when I got into the changing room, I mean, I'd never seen jerseys hanging up beautifully presented, and your socks and everything like that, and then I saw a big table in the middle of the changing room at the Boet Erasmus Stadium, and it had like a calico Standard Bank bag lying on the table. And I didn't know what it was, but I also didn't want to ask too many questions, because I was the youngster in the crowd there. And I didn't even know some of the guys, I mean, that I was playing with. But I then noticed that everybody took their valuables and, their rings and their watches and whatever it might be to put into this bag. And then they'd lock the bag away somewhere. And then I saw a couple of guys taking their teeth out and putting that in the bag.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, it's like, it's unreal. And there's a youngster who you might know, Michael, Francois de Villiers at Grey.
Yes.
He was at Grey. So his dad, also Francois, was our scrum half in that game. So we were the only 2 Grey boys in the team. And so I went across to him and I said to him, Francois, what is going on here? These guys are putting all this stuff in and their teeth and the whole bang shoot. Anyway, he just laughed it off, because he'd played a few games already. And then Dennis Comfer was the guy that was playing alongside me, and I was playing centre in that game. And funnily enough, Bill Beaumont played in that game too. Yeah. And anyway, so Dennis came across to me, and he was like a huge guy, and he was like like a really rough Afrikaner, And he came up to me, and in Afrikaans, he said to me, don't you take your teeth out when you play? And I said to him, I've got my teeth. He said, no, you must take your teeth out and you put it in the bag. So I said, no. There were only 2 guys in that team that had their own teeth. It was myself and Francois.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have played with mouth guards at that stage, no?
With who?
With mouth guards.
I know. In fact, that's another thing, because a few years later, probably about 4 years into, we never had mouth guards, yeah. And somebody brought these things along and said, would I be interested in wearing the very first one that was ever made for South African? Yeah.
What was that like?
This beautiful girl, I still remember her name too. Tosca van Rooyen was her name. Was the girl who had the picture taken with me, and she's a real beaut as well.
She must have made an impression if you remember her name.
Yeah, I do, very definitely, yeah. And so we had this photograph that went in the newspaper, and with her fitting the gum guard into my mouth. And anyway, so I went to a practice the next day, and the guys were ribbing me, eh? It's like you're a morphie, you know. I mean, how can you wear a gum guard? You know, gum guards are art. I mean, we've never had these things before, but yeah. And that was the sort of start of it, you know. So it's quite amazing, you know. When I see also my grandkids now, and they're playing rugby, and they're still very young. You have to start with the gum guard, of course, and I mean, a lot of those guys got their teeth knocked out, I think, when they were still at school, or I don't quite know what the issue was, but yeah. It was so Michael, Jeff, that was like an adaptation process, you know, to suddenly being in a dressing room where, and I've got no issues with people saying prayers before a game, but you would like get together in a huddle, you know, and they'd someone would say a prayer, excuse me, and very often, you know, that the prayer was sort of designed around making sure that we win. Well, and so a little unfair, I'd say, on the opposition, but that's the way it was, you know. And I'll tell you something else, you know, you've got to also ask yourselves, you too, Jeff, ask yourself, did you ever play in a game where you never finished the game at school? For whatever the reason might be. It could have been because you guys were giving the opposition a hiding and they called it short. But I played in a game with the same Dennis Comfo, who was at a school called Otto du Plessis. And about 10 minutes into the second half, there was like a huge thing there. And, you know, the people there used to stand on the touchline. There was no sort of, you had to stay behind a barrier or something. And there was a huge fight broke out. And the ref just decided, look, that's it. And he blew the game. And that was it, you know. And off we went.
That's never happened for me either. I think once maybe when I was playing with Nelson Mandela Metropolitan, we were playing out in PE, out in Uitenhage, and there was a huge fight that broke out in the stands. I think someone was chucking piss on the other guy next to him or something like that, and there was a huge fight. I remember that. I was actually playing with Lindsay Vaya, who is the analyst for the Springboks now. He was playing 10 for me down in PE. His dad was Wayne Vaya, who played for Border for like 180 times.
Yes,
and
he did.
And we were sitting there on the middle of the pitch, and I just said, Lindsay, listen, let's just stay here, bud. Stay right in the middle of the pitch. We're pretty safe. We got our boots. We can run pretty fast. Let's stay here. But I can relate with Gavin on that English part, because when I came through in South Africa, I always felt like everywhere you go, you've got to adapt. You've got to earn your stripes, because you're always taken as the Englishman, like you're soft. So I had to prove myself every single club, and especially playing at Hammies. When I walked in there, you know, our whole team is very, well, it's a bit of a 50-50 balance, but more Afrikaans. And there was nothing better than winning them over, you know, because you were tough. And it's like, okay, this Englishman's got a bit of something about him, you know. He's not going to just lie down. I had the flash shoes and the lacquer jeans and all those things, but when an Afrikaans guy gives you, you know, that little wink, or he gives you that sign that you've got in your good books, yeah, then it's a lack of feeling actually. But people around the world don't know what it's like. It's tough for English player to come through. There hasn't been that many great English Springboks. There have been, Bob Skinstead, Gary Tachman, now Jesse Creel. There's a few, but it's not as many as the Afrikaans. The Afrikaans guys have completely dominated Springbok rugby, and it's quite difficult for me in my generation. If you weren't coming through as a black player or Afrikaans player, it's very difficult to come through as an English guy, because I don't care what anyone says. I knew I played on the wing. It was going to be very difficult for me to make it through the system. But I also knew that it had to be done, because look what we've got to now on the other side in terms of, we'll get there, Gavin, because I'd love to talk to you about what you've seen from the 70s to where Springbok rugby is now. And I don't think you've had a better seat. You've been at the front row scouting, seeing players at Craven weeks, at, you know, like I said, and Mike said, hearing your voice on a Saturday afternoon, you knew you're in for a treat. Seeing Bob Skinstead spinning that ball on his finger in the black Stormers kit. is like iconic as anything, as
Yeah.
Mike would always remind me. And your voice would go with that, building that anticipation and the storyline, the journey of Springbok rugby. It's so lucky to have you, you know. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming on.
I just
Yeah.
I just got to jump in here because you did make me think of if I ever had a school game cut short, and you mentioned Utenegg. We were playing, it was my grade 11 year, so my standard, what's that, standard 9. We
Yeah.
were playing first team against Daniel Pienaar, and the referee, do you remember the ref called Philip Bosch?
Yes.
No, he was reffing our game against Daniel. What is Daniel Duplessis? What's it? Daniel Pienaar.
Daniel Pienaar. Daniel
Daniel
Pienaar.
Pienaar. Yeah, it's a
One of
technical
their,
school.
yeah, one of their parents ran onto the field and tackled him because they weren't happy with the way he was refereeing. So he blew the game. So that was my one and only time a school game was cut short, for whatever other reason. Yeah.
Well,
Utenegg.
I'll tell you what, I'll tell you about a game in Utenegg too. Interesting, just while you're talking about it. So you guys both know David Callahan,
Yeah.
the cricketer, and also played rugby for EP too. Very talented sportsman. Well, his dad, Mike, was refereeing when I was playing club rugby. And I played for UPE, which is now Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. And we had a really good side, a very, very good side. And we were playing a game in Utenegg, and Mike Callahan was the referee in the game, and he was like a real gentleman, you know. And it was a disaster because the linesman for Old Collegians, who was the team we were playing against, he was continually trying to trip up our guys when they were running past, and he was on the touchline. and Skalk Berger, Big Skalk, that senior, got stuck into a few of their guys as well. I mean, he wouldn't stand back. He just got stuck in. He said, this is the only way to play against these guys. And anyway, Mike Callahan made a few decisions during the game, which were like disputed by the crowd and the players and, you know, the local people there. And towards the end of the game, I saw him run across to the touch judge on the other side. And he had some words with him. I don't know quite what he said there, but what transpired was when the final whistle went, we just saw him running off to his motor car, and the car had been started by somebody so he could get the hell out of there before somebody lynched him, because we won the game and there was a lot of very unhappy people.
Well, the leagues I'm coaching in now, jeepers, there are some shocking referees, Jeff. Honestly.
But let me tell you something about Mr.
I've
Callahan.
learned patience.
Bro, let me tell you something about Mr. Dave Callahan. So I was playing for Selborne, and all my life I'd been watching Dale Selborne reunions. My dad's old Dalian, and I was playing 10 in my grade 10 year. So I was 16 years old, or grade 11, whatever it was. And I'd been kicking for poles, and I missed 6 kicks. The last kick of the game, I said to Mr. Callahan, I'll take the post, sir. And he looked at me and said, my boy, are you sure you want to take this for post? He looked me dead in the eyes. He said, are you sure you want to kick again? You want to have a go again? Score was 5-7. I missed the kick. We lost the game, and Dale won the game. And it was honestly, I was in tears after the game. And after the match, Dave came up to me and gave me a tap. Hey, listen, don't worry. I'll never forget it. Daryl Cullinan's brother. And he was a great ref, and he refed us all through that generation. It's so funny you told me that story. But he was my ref during that game. It's a game I'll never forget. I missed 6 kicks. And on the 7th one, in front of the post to win the game, he said to me, are you sure you want to take this kick? I said, yes.
Yeah, before we get into a bit more of your journey, I just wanted to go back to that. You obviously left school, kind of left school, and you were pretty much straight into or what would be the equivalent of the professional ranks, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So like all the youngsters coming through now, they get a lot of material to ensure that they're mentally prepared. You know, they're mature enough. They have a lot of people talking to them about, you know, your mental gym, how you prepare mentally to go into an environment with older players, more experienced players, how to deal with the pressures, etc., etc. How did you, as a young 20-year-old, deal with the mental side of going into what I can imagine was a really rugged environment? It's not like it is now where people are a lot more forgiving and understanding. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a very big uh, bully mentality, or you the lighty and you must know your place. So how did you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, it's a great question that,
Yeah.
I think that many people could give their sort of their version of their journey, whatever their journey was. And for us, you must remember that when I was finishing at school, a guy that played cricket for England, John Jamieson, uh, wanted me to come to Warwickshire to play cricket in the county championship, hopefully. And then I also got an offer from Rovigo in Italy to go and play rugby there at the time. And in between all of that, Dr. Craven was on my dad's case about me going to Stellenbosch, which I eventually decided, and luckily my dad left me to make the decision that I didn't want to do that. So I was very, very sport was great for me, and my whole life has been sport. But importantly for me, I wanted to make sure that I was a rounded person, which meant I wanted to go to university. I wanted to get a degree, and I would play my sport and do my other things too. So we had all of those things that were available to us, Um, but when you talk about the mental side of things, um, it's not like it is today, I don't think. Because, ultimately, if you're a young guy, you've probably got your parents who are, or in many cases, the parents are pushing you quite hard to become a professional athlete where you can make lots of money if you're a good one. And that's very much the case, of course. So you've got that, number one. Number two, you are surrounded by people, they're mental coaches for most teams, physiotherapists and all those things. We never had a physiotherapist. We never had a physio right through my rugby career. Our, excuse me, our medical doctor was the guy that used to rub us before the game and do whatever we had to do. So a lot of those things were not around at the time. And the other thing, importantly as well, I have a very strong feeling about a secondment program. And I believe that young guys should be introduced to a secondment program. And by that, I mean every single rugby player has some or other talent or, excuse me, off the field of play, um, has a talent or a liking for something, whether it's IT or finance or marketing or whatever it might be. And that players today, and you guys, it should be part of your contracts as well, that you need to go and we get companies that are prepared to accept you, not to come and sign autographs, but to come and learn about something you're very keen on. You want to be a carpenter or whatever it might be. And I'm sure that there are companies that would make themselves available that on a Wednesday afternoon when you have off, that you actually go there and you start learning the trade and how things work with that, because the thing that worries me is that I don't know how many guys have adequate coverage of their finances. Importantly, those guys that are earning 100K a month or whatever it might be, and yes, there may be not that many of them, but some of them, I think, like have their mates or something that are looking after their money, and then the guy wants to buy like 2 or 3 motor cars and whatever it might be. So how do you guide people, and you need an accountant to do that, a trustworthy person that can help you with that sort of thing, So you have a wide variety of people, you guys today, which we didn't have. We didn't have any of that sort of thing. And we were, the mental preparation was more done on the basis of sort of individuals, because we didn't have anybody in particular that would do it for us. Um, and excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. And maybe there's just, it's the, if it's your background, I think to a large extent. I was very lucky in that I came from a very sporting family. So my mother was one of the best tennis players in South Africa. Um, Two of my uncles, her two brothers, both played provincial cricket, and one played for South Africa. In fact, he is today the oldest living international cricketer, Ronnie Draper. He's 97. Wow. He lives in PE. So I came from that environment where a lot of stuff was passed on to me, and I would like go and watch cricket and watch my mom playing tennis and that sort of thing. And you learn quite a lot from those things, by observation. But there wasn't anybody that was sort of like giving you. I mean, I know that also from a kicking perspective, I never had a kicking coach, and I kicked at goal. And today, when I watch and see how guys are prepared, so Gareth Wright down here with the Stormers is a good mate of mine, and Gareth taking a bit of a pounding with Moini Libok now, not being successful enough. But I see what he takes them through, you know, how they go about their not just technique, but also their mental preparation, you know, in terms of that. So I never had that. And there were times now when I look and I say, wow, that's a better way to kick a rugby ball than the way we used to kick it, you know?
Yeah.
So you sort of like you learn as you go along. But I want to just also mention something else to you guys, which for me was very interesting. And Michael, here's another hooker. You know, you hookers are all over the place. This guy was Sean Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
And Sean Fitzpatrick said to me, I was interviewing him after a game with they just lost against the Boks. And he also had a blue eye after the game, and I had to go down and do the interviews, and I thought, oh shit, this is not going to be so easy. And I got to him, and he looked at me and he said, how do I look, mate? So I said, well, you've got a bit of a blue eye and you've got a bit of grass, you know, stuck on the side of your mouth here. He said, clean it up, clean it up. This was before we went on air. So I took it off and all whatever, and we did the interview, and it was a brilliant interview. And he spoke during the course of it about, you know, the importance of how you present yourself. I think the All Blacks have a high level, and New Zealanders have a high level of respect. They use that word respect. They use a lot in certainly rugby terminology, you know. And I went afterwards, after we'd finished, and I went to the dressing room, and I asked the manager if he could get Sean out. And he came out, and I took his hand, and I said, Sean, thank you so much. You know, that was a brilliant interview. You guys have just been smashed by the Boks, and you took a pounding just before the end there. And he looked at me and he said, you know, mate, he said, this game is all about not you. There are other people too. There's your team, you know, your teammates, your province, as you call it in South Africa, you know, the country of New Zealand and the game of rugby. And we all have a responsibility for that, you know.
Yeah.
And then about 2 years later, he said to me, he said, we're going to struggle against you guys. And I said, why? I mean, you guys are top of the world. And he said, no. He says, you just become a democracy. And as now suddenly you're going to choose from 50 million people and not 5.
Yeah.
Which comes back to your point as well, Jeff, because, you know, there's an upside and a downside to that too, because if you're a wing or a scrum half, you know, you might be saying to yourself, you know, maybe I'm not I don't have the right skin color. And so I'm going to go and try and play somewhere else, you know, whether it's in Canada or Australia or wherever it might be. And those options are open to you guys now. I mean, both of you have now traveled the world, you know. You've played rugby in other countries. Parlez-vous français? Oui?
Oui, je parlais, ouais. Je parlais bien, hein. C'est 6 ans ici. 6 years in France.
So you know, what's happened for you guys are a lot more mature than what we were at your age, because we were so isolated in South Africa, you know. I mean, the isolation was terrible. I can recall in 1976 I played for the World 15 against the Cardiff club in Wales, in Cardiff, at Cardiff Arms Park, and I stayed on after the game for a little while in London, and I went to a restaurant there. And this shows you how naive we were. And it was the restaurant was quite busy, and I had a table, and there were like, you know, 2 or 3 other seats at the table, and these 2 girls came and sat down at the table. And I mean, I didn't know what to say, you know. And I thought, but so you wouldn't do that in South Africa. That's my table, you know. They just sat down, they started chatting, and they had a sort of Middle Eastern look about them. I don't know where they came from, but they asked me about myself. And when I told them I was from South Africa, they just launched into me like you won't believe. A complete tirade. They had a full go at me. And the word racist came out and whatever. Yeah. We'd not been exposed to those things, you know, the outside world. Our world was very much a local world, you know. Anyway, listen, I'm doing all the talking here. Sorry, guys.
No,
But,
it's interesting.
No, this is lovely. This is what we want. I love hearing these sort of stories. It's so you go back and forth about it because you're right. I suppose you had to give up a lot for us to be where we are today. Do you understand? You had to go through all these times. Imagine you guys were free and could travel and play in different places and play for your country. Look at you, Gav. You had to you sacrificed, well, they sacrificed your whole career. You know, the best years of your playing life. So for me to say, it was difficult to leave and because I was a winger, I completely understood it. I knew the country needed to do that to push people into places of selection, and it had to be done because we needed heroes for South Africa, for the democracy. We need to have players like that. So when I hear your story, it makes you feel it's a good conversation. It shows you where South African rugby was, where it's where it's going, and where it actually is right now. So hearing that is and especially
it's a
when
very
you come from
mature
Eastern
way.
Cape. Yeah,
a very
exactly.
mature way of looking at things. And, I don't think there's enough people like you that actually have that attitude, because you can make your bed wherever you want to in the world these days. You have those opportunities, and there are plenty. The other important thing, I think, in all sport, not just rugby, is that there are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of business opportunities as well, for people, whether it's coaching or whether it's administration or whatever it might be. And playing sevens rugby, sevens rugby we used to play it at the end of the year, the end of the season. It was like just 1 week, you'd have the sevens and you'd play some sevens, and they called it a morphe sport, so but we had a lot of fun doing it, but it was never that important. Now you can actually make a career out of it, travel the world, and earn money from it too, which is brilliant. It's great for everybody,
Yeah, do you know what I found really interesting about your talents was the fact that you were a provincial sportsman across 3 sports. I found that you don't get anyone like that because kids today are so focused on one thing. I mean, I played cricket. I think I was 15 or 16 when I stopped and put all my focus into rugby. And I think it's becoming more and more, popular for kids to kind of pick their sport early. Do you think how were you able to manage I know it's a different time, a different era. How were you able to manage all of that? And also, do you think that kind of mindset helped you with your rugby and your cricket? Because a lot of the kids today coming out of school into the professional ranks, it's like do or die. It's like if I don't have a good game, I'm gone. So they don't have that holistic, grounded approach to life, to the game. As you mentioned, you wanted to be a well-rounded individual. And I mean, I don't know if it's a systematic issue where it doesn't work like that anymore. But like Yanni du Plessis, for example, I think it's incredible that he was able to become a doctor while playing for the Springboks. I mean, I think that's more the exception rather than the rule. But how did you find that? Did that help you? Were you able to kind of enjoy your sport more because it wasn't the be all and end all?
Yeah, another great question that I would say the answer to that probably is yes. Playing different sports. So, for example, I would play a provincial rugby match on a Saturday afternoon, let's just say, or a rugby match. Sunday morning, I'd play hockey for PE men's. And Sunday afternoon, I'd play a football game for Old Grey. We had an Old Grey football side.
How did you find the energy? Did you not tackle or carry? You just kicked.
Listen, I was a fly-off, man. You must understand. We're clever.
Your pants never got dirty.
Our pants never got dirty. So we'd run around and do our thing. Yeah, no, so, but just from a fitness perspective, I mean, I was really fit, and I mean, we spent a lot of time. That's one thing I used to do is train really quite hard, but not always in a team environment. So in many cases, the guys would do their own training, And if a rugby player today said he was going to go and do Pilates, in my time, they'll call you a morphe. I mean, what are you going to go and do Pilates for, But these are things that help to tone your body. I've always said, I think in modern day, I mean, all 3 of us were at very good schools, but water polo, I think, is really, really good for body toning, you
Yeah.
know, and as kids grow up, sometimes kids become tall very quickly. And then their backs get a little bit unstable, and then they play a game like cricket, you know, which is an unnatural movement in everything you do, and they start having back problems and that sort of thing, you know. So I think a lot of the sports that are available today, I mean, we never had paddle in our day, for example. I don't know if you guys had. Are there paddle courts in the UK and France?
Yeah, it's
Oh, it's huge over here. In
massive.
France, it's like a yeah. It's the new tennis. It's definitely
I've
Yeah.
never played it. I've never played it.
No, I haven't either, but I've watched it, and it's actually brilliant, you know. So it's like
Oh,
our
yeah.
tennis set at school, you know. We used to have tennis set
yeah.
where you play with like a wooden bat, you know, yeah, like you do on the beach, you know, when you're
Yeah.
hammering the ball around. Michael, I haven't answered your first question or your second question, that with regards to that sort of that growing up environment and the time. I don't think I properly sort of like answered that, because there's so many different facets to that, I think, in terms of growing up and also experiencing the world, you know. So I actually, funnily enough, played in one rugby match and one cricket match in another country, two other countries, and you won't guess what those countries are. So I made my Currie Cup debut, cricket-wise, with my hair very short, just come out of the army, the military service, in Bulawayo,
Oh, hey.
in Zim, which was then Rhodesia.
Yeah.
And that game became like it was like an unbelievable match. It ended up being called a draw, and I won't go into all the detail with it now. And Rhodesia would have won the Currie Cup if they'd won that game, and they were very close to winning it, chasing over 300. And we walked off the field. Our captain just took us off and said, no, they bowled 20 overs, and the umpire said, no, it was 19. And there was a whole hullabaloo with that. But anyway, that's for another day. And the second one made me think as well, when we were talking about not finishing games. We played a compulsory friendly against Southwest Africa in Windhoek, which is now Namibia, of course.
Yeah.
And just after half time, our captain of our side, I was vice captain. Our captain was a guy called Terry McGee, who was also great, funnily enough.
Yeah.
And there was a huge punch up. The whole game was just a punch up. I mean, it was unbelievable. He led us off the field, and we never finished the game. And he ended up being banned and stripped of the captaincy, and you know, he was never the same player again after that. But yeah, those are like two walk-off games, one in cricket, one in rugby, and both in other countries.
That's crazy.
Oh, well, I only asked about obviously going in as a young grey boy into that environment, how you kind of handled that, because I remember from my experience, obviously also Greys, obviously you brought up English, you play the English style of rugby, and after school I went to Bloemfontein to the Cheetahs.
Yeah,
It was a massive culture shock for me, because I think I was maybe one of two English boys in that whole under 19, under 20 setup. So it was incredibly challenging. And even when times had moved on and we understood how you needed to handle yourself and you needed to be mature from a young age, it was incredibly difficult. So I can only imagine how much more difficult it would have been back in the 70s. But yeah, so that's why I asked that question, to see how another grey boy, because I know, like, I think of my cat, for example, and my cat really struggled with EP. He had to go over to England, and you know,
yeah,
he was a great player, could have very easily, well, he certainly had the talents and the gifts to play for South Africa, but just
yeah.
was considered a bit too English. So I think times have moved on a little bit, but it is quite it's challenging in that sense. But I guess at the end of the day, when someone has the monopoly over someone, you've got to either fall in line or jump.
No, well,
Here's the
it's what
funny
Jeff
thing,
said. It's what Jeff said just a little bit earlier. You know, you stand up and be counted, and the level of respect that will be given to you as a Soti or an English-speaking guy is tops if you're producing the goods, you know.
Yeah.
So there's a high level of respect for that too. So it's not as, you know, as if you are just cast one side.
No.
And you guys had to learn quickly too, you know. So I mean, when you went to Bloemfontein, you know, as a youngster, I can't imagine that I would have left school and gone straight into, you know, that sort of setup, because you know, I had so many considerations, you know, whether it's girlfriends or university or whatever the heck it might be, you know. There were
Girls
all those
should be
things.
at the top of your agenda, Gav. That's the third time girls have come out in this conversation. Wow.
Yeah, it is the first
I'm
time.
just
But
joking.
well, today your wife could be playing cricket for South Africa or rugby for South
Yeah.
Africa as well, eh? That didn't exist in my day there. I mean, there was just none of that around at all, you know. Women were sort of like at home, you know, and in fact a lot of women at the time never actually worked. They were housewives, you know. And I mean, today
Yeah.
it's very rare to find, you know, a father and a mother that don't both work in some form or another. So those things, you know, those things, they, I don't know, it's a lot of things have to change in your life as you go. But the maturity, you guys, as I said a bit earlier, you guys are a lot more mature than what we are. You're a lot better conditioned than what we are or were at the time. But we had this variety of things that was keeping us busy, you know. I mean, the
Exactly.
things that we used to do. So whether and we would play, you know, a lot of golf and soccer and whatever it might have been. And Michael van Vieren, I need to add there that you don't know that I was the Victor Ladorum at Grey as well.
Really?
You know what that is?
Yeah, of course.
Academic award.
No, that's for athletics.
You win all the events. You got the most points. It's a victory.
Well, it shows how much I knew about athletics.
I did athletics.
I thought
Well,
it's an athletic. What were your events?
my events were 4x100,
Yeah.
400 meters, and the javelin. My javelin record at Grey stood for many, many years. I don't know, maybe it still stands.
That's lekker, that. I love that. I used to love, I'm obsessed. I'm a little bit like you. I did all the sports, you know, and I was obsessed with records, and I knew everyone. I knew every single first team, like major years, the 99 Selborne year, the 98 Selborne year, Grey when they had Watson in the team. I was obsessed. So when I hear these stories, and I can just feel how it used to be, because it used to be seasonal. You know, cricket comes around and you love it as much as you love rugby. You know, or athletics season comes around and you can do the Hirsch Shield against Dale and Queens.
Yeah.
And it's full on competition, and Grey. And it's full on competition. And I remember growing up, and there were always in South Africa, there were always all-rounders, great all-rounders that could do every single sport. Herschel Gibbs, yourself, Jacques Cullis, you know, guys that can do anything, because South Africa is like that. We are a adaptable bunch of people, because culturally, you can see South Africans, English, Afrikaans, Xhosa, Zulu, but also our schools give us that opportunity to try everything, you know?
Yeah, but you can't now, Jeff. That's the point, you know.
That's the point. You can't do that anymore. Yeah.
You can't do it anymore, yeah. And I think that's a limitation, because the earlier point that you guys made as well about, you know, the people that you play with, what you learn, how you adapt to different people, you know, different cultures as well. You know, people saying a prayer before the game, all of those things, you know. I mean, you think about it, it's like massive change, you know. So many different things that previously existed that maybe don't now, and vice versa. I'm sure there are others too, you know. I mean, we would come off the field, and the first thing you do is you have a beer, you know. But
I think
you guys today, you're not allowed to have a beer. You've got to have a shake or something before.
Yeah.
Who told you that? That is the biggest myth. That is such a lie.
Is it not true?
Honestly, I've played with some rugby players. I've never seen people drink as much as them in my life. So I think that part of the culture is still well and truly alive, Gav. Don't you?
Okay.
No, but I just want to fast forward now to 74 Lions tour, because obviously, as rugby supporters and rugby lovers, the Lions are revered, aren't they? Like the Lions to me are revered. I mean, my earliest memories of the Lions was the
1997. I was a ball boy at the BRU, the band.
I was also at that game.
Were you there?
It was just so muddy. The Lions
Yes,
just round,
yes.
yeah. Small world, eh? But
Small world.
my lasting memory of that was seeing Jeremy Guscott's drop goal in Durban.
Yeah.
And Scott Gibbs just pin bowling through the Springbok defense. But obviously, the Lions is revered by the South Africans. And you are obviously part of the 74 tour, where the famous 99 call was. I was trying to explain to Jeff what the 99 call was, and you must correct me if I'm wrong. But was the captain of that side Willie John McBride?
Yeah.
Okay, and the 99 call was basically, if they heard that, they just flew in with fists, knees, elbows, everything.
You know, that when they came out here, there was a very strong belief in their side. By the way, it was an unbelievably good team. I can tell you now, they'd won in New Zealand 3 years before that for the first time ever. But this was an incredibly good side.
That would have been, would that have been Gareth Edwards, JPR Williams, Phil
Yeah.
Bennett, those boys?
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of them. Yeah, no, there was just no weakness in that side, and the hooker was a guy called Bobby, the Duke of Windsor. And
was that his legal surname?
he was Bobby Windsor, but they used to call him the Duke.
Oh,
And he'd sit and have a cigarette before the game in the
Yeah.
changing room. I mean, you know, these are the things the guys used to do. But that whole thing was discussed around how they were going to tackle the tour of South Africa, because we'd bullied a lot of teams over the years. Our physicality was always tops, and you know, we beat a lot of teams through just, you know, sheer strength and that sort of thing too over the years. And they decided they were not going to stand back for us. They were actually going to climb into us. And when we played against those Lions before the first test, I think it was the third game of the tour or something like that, Johan Claassen, the Springbok coach, had a word with our guys, and that we had to take them on physically. And this particular game became a hugely physical encounter. And these guys, I think everyone was shocked. These Oaks took no nonsense from us at all. And the belief behind the 99 call was that you hit the first guy who's closest to you. Everybody, ideally at the same time. Because there's no way as a referee can send 15 men off the field. and I mean, it's logically, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? You know? So,
It makes a lot of sense.
yeah. So luckily, me with my nice white shorts, Michael, happened to be some distance from the fracas when it broke out. And the punching started. And Phil Bennett was standing just next to me. And I didn't know what was going on. I mean, he could have punched me. I wouldn't have known, you know. Why is this guy punching me? I'm not even part of this mix. But that was their call, and we didn't know about that call. And yeah, he just slung his arm around my shoulder and he said, you know, let's watch the show. Let's watch the show.
No, that must have been an incredible experience playing against the Lions.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, they were so good. You know, there was not a weak spot in that side. And, you know, some of the names in that team were not household names for us here in South Africa, aside from McBride and Phil Bennett, Gareth Edwards and those guys, you know, JPR Williams, JJ Williams on the wing, the Welshman. I mean, Fergus Slattery, like unbelievably good players. And then the guys that we didn't know that well actually really stood up and were counted, you know, and they smashed us, eh? You know, we lost those first 3 tests, and there were 4 test matches. The fourth one, we drew 13 all. But there was a question around that draw too. I mean, I think Fergus Slattery actually scored a try, which was not awarded. So it should have been a clean sweep, and deservedly so. Because I mean, I've never seen anything like this. They were so good at everything that they did, well prepared. And I think there's almost a book could be written on that tour alone. About the British and Irish Lions. Well, they were just called the British Lions at that time, not the British and Irish Lions, even although there were Irish guys playing as well, you know. So Roger Young, who was the backup scrum half when they came out here, he never went home. He was a dentist, stayed here. He became my dentist.
That's similar to John Robbie.
Yeah, like John Robbie in 1980, John Robbie did the same thing. Yeah, just said no,
Fun in love,
this
eh?
place is
Fun
for
in
me.
love.
How many
I'm
of
saying
those?
yeah.
How many of those British Lions? You mentioned a few names there. How many of them do you think would have been great players in this generation? Obviously, given all the
Yeah,
tech use and gym and exercise science, do you think their talents would have translated fairly easily?
it's a hard question to answer that because the game has changed so much, But if I just look at sheer talent alone, um, physicality, JPR Williams, for example, JPR Williams, the fullback, was a medical doctor. Um, and I mean, he set the world alight. But he was not a very good kicker of the ball, but he used to run a lot of the ball, And if I take him today and say, okay, so how would he fit in if he was playing fullback for South Africa or whoever? And it's difficult to say, because would he need to change his game somewhat in the way that he played? I think also when you look today at modern day rugby, with the defensive systems that all the teams have, and you guys have been through that and you're coaching it now as well, whether you've got a rush defense or you've got a banana defense or whatever it might be, we I think had a little bit more room to move because we moved the ball around a lot more,
Yeah.
and the gaps were not always closed as quickly as they are today, So that also could be a limitation for a guy that's played in a time where there was a little bit more freedom of movement,
Yeah.
a guy like him. But if you look at a guy like Gareth Edwards, for example, I mean, Gareth was unbelievably good. He was just so good. And as a scrum half, scrum halves are to a certain extent protected a little bit more today. But he would definitely have made it. Phil Bennett is another one. So Phil Bennett was a guy who also he kicked well too, but he enjoyed running with the ball. And we've seen some of the great tries that he scored too, So those guys, Slattery, another one, Fergus Slattery, unbelievably good. So I think the names I'm mentioning now would very easily have adapted to the modern day game. Whether they would have played the same game that they played then is obviously in question, I mean, I don't know. But maybe nobody would be able to answer that. So the talent was there, and sometimes when I look back from when I started playing and go back 20 years, and you see a picture of a guy or British movie tone or something, and you think to yourself, how did these guys play with those boots? They were like polio boots, these huge things,
Yeah.
with
Hiking
leather
boots, eh?
studs. Yeah, like leather studs and things, How did these guys play, and you think to yourself, the shorts don't fit them properly as well. They're too small or they're too big or whatever it might be. But the talent, I suppose you could take any sport and analyze it. And I know cricket would be exactly the same. And so how would it be today with those guys playing here? And if we went back to their era, how I think you guys would have adapted a lot better than the other way around. If you had to go back, say, 20 years, 15 years to go and play at a time where you had a bit more freedom of movement, the ball was different,
Yeah.
I mean, today's a synthetic ball, we played with leather balls. They got very heavy in the wet and, that sort of thing. But you could kick them quite a long distance because they were a little bit heavier. So, as you say, no gum guards, there are a lot of things are different, they really, so it's hard to do a comparison, I think. And that's why I don't think it's that easy to say, what was the greatest Springbok team ever? If you had to pick 23 guys now, remember when we played, there were only 3 reserves, eh?
Yeah.
There was a hooker, a scrum half, and a utility back.
Yeah.
You only had 3 guys on the bench. Now you've got plenty. So that also, changes things. And also, you can't bring a guy onto the field unless somebody is so injured, that so there's no replacements. We didn't have replacements. We only had reserves, and it's hard
It's
for
actually
people to
crazy
understand.
it's crazy when you think like it, because you have videos seeing people getting carried off by the refs, the assistant linesman, and you see the guys almost knocked out completely, and he's getting carried off in his videos. And you think about the way people react to a high tackle today and concussion. The poor guys 20 years, 30, 40 years ago, the way they used to get kicked, knocked out, it's crazy. And people forget rugby as a sport is about that a bit. It's the balance between players like yourself who could play cricket, hockey, who's just got that touch, the hand-eye coordination, playing with a guy like Skultberger. You wouldn't want to find him in the middle of a pub or in a dark alley. He'd knock you clean out your boots. But that's the beauty of the game. And people forget, people want to watch it because it's a barbaric sport, but played by gentlemen. You know, it's like, it is tough. It's a tough game. And I can just imagine when I watch those videos and you think about it, there's no substitution. You had to play 80 minutes. The endurance sport that was rugby is completely different to playing a guy who's fresh. You look at the books now, and the way we win is a lot to do with how we use the bench and how we have this depth that comes on in the bomb squad.
Yeah.
So it's really changed, and the whole world is moaning about it. But them moaning about it means jack shit. We're still winning. So it shows you that they're not evolving their game. So South Africa are way ahead with that. But it comes from that exact thing. Rugby was a different game because it was endurance. What could you do in the 75th minute, playing 75 minutes? I know I can't play at 75. I'm just one of those athletes. I've got nothing in the tank. I'm high twitch, I'm like, you almost look like a Quagga Smith. He can't play 80 because he's a high twitch athlete. When he's coming onto the pitch, he's almost thinking, am I going to last 80 here? You know, because it's in the back of his mind. But I watch it, and when I'm watching it now and I listen to this from you, I think it's so wise to speak to someone like you, because you have seen the game evolve from the 70s, 60s into modern day rugby. And it's a very wise answer, that, because you can't compare. You can to some degree. I mean, for me, I always loved the rugby players like yourself who could play multiple sports. They've got that hand-eye coordination, a Dan Carter, Johnny Wilkinson. They just catch the ball. They look so smooth. A lot of them are left-handers or left-footers or play cricket off the left, the bat left. And you think of them, and they made the game look beautiful. It's like a footballer. They just made it look easy. They could pass off both hands. Those type of players would transfer easily into the modern day. And then your really rough, tough second layer, locks and props and maybe hookers. The rest would find it difficult.
Yeah, no, that's also, I think it's a very good summary of that, Jeff, you know, because also, you know, luckily we didn't have television before 1976, because for a lot of games had been televised, and you had to watch them today, and you watch how we basically trampled guys at a ruck, you know, and like ran over them and stood on them, and, you know, these like huge studs and that. And I mean, and also we used to clap each other as well. I mean, there was plenty of punching and carrying on and that. And, you know, the ref had no cards in his pocket, remember, eh? There were no cards. No yellow and red cards, just a whistle. That's it.
Oh, sorry, Gav, go ahead.
No, it's the physicality, I think. You know, the physicality has always been in the game. And I think for some guys today as well, they've maybe their upbringing and the game that they've played has been sort of very, very physical, and they thrive on that. And now, because I see also the WhatsApp groups that I'm on, and a lot of the ex-EP rugby players and that, the guys don't like the fact that we, excuse me, that we're not able to punch a guy in the field. You know, you're going to get found out. There are cameras everywhere, so you can't even. When you go down in the scrum and somebody says, open up, you know, next to you, so the lock's fist comes through, and there you are sort of hanging there, you won't get away with it. You're in big, big trouble, you know. And to a certain extent, I think as well, Jeff, just touching on your comments there as well, if you look at the laws of the game, you know, I think the law book is being modified all the time by World Rugby, and they're looking for, you know, the right things to add to the shot clock and the this and the that and everything that goes with it. But it is still quite a thick book, eh? You know, that law book is still quite a thick one. And I think we have to keep working at they want to speed up the game, but we've also got to not take away the physicality in its entirety, because it is part of it. You're right.
Yeah. Entertainment sport, you know, one of the biggest entertainment sports is a combat sport, UFC. Yeah. And you think about, people want to watch gladiators go at each other. And I remember watching the guys from Stormers, Sharks, these generations, the Springboks of those years, Bucky Sporter. It was like you got goosebumps thinking about these guys are going to absolutely club each other. And I just don't want us to go away from that, because you hear it on people's podcasts and you hear some of the ex-rugby players talk about it. But You know, in England especially, it's gone very PC, and a lot of the woke society there, you know, they can't show the rugby adverts on BBC. And come to France, and I promise you now, the guys are still in the change room having a smoke, having a beer, and at halftime they're talking about how they want to murder the guys. They want to. It's a fight is, if you're losing by 50 points, the coach is coming in telling them it's a punch up. So this old school mentality is still in France, and I'm being blessed to see this. But I love hearing from you and hearing how it was back in the day in South Africa, because it's very much like France. France is like that still to this day. And when I came over in 2011, and I was playing low division, so amateur rugby, Federal 1, before I went and played for England Sevens, about 6 or 7 games that year, the coach would just give a call like a 99. It wasn't 99. He would just go like this to the prop.
Yeah.
And the Georgian prop would start flying in. And I remember watching this and being like, I was 21 years old from South Africa. I've never seen a fight on a pitch. My stomach was I was torn up. The next day at training, I would look at the weights, and I looked at the boxing bag, and I looked at the weights, and I said, I've got to go do some boxing bag work, because these guys in France, they properly throw you blindsides from the back, from this. It was crazy, actually.
Can I throw something in, Michael, just with you on picture right now, which is a little bit of it's not a curveball, but it's a little bit away from what we're talking about right now. You know, you're learning all the time, and I'm still learning as well. We all learn. We continue to learn. We have fresh experiences. We learn good, bad, indifferent from them. I know that he used to spend a lot of time at your house, Sia Khaleesi.
Yes.
And you were at school with him. How did you find people like Sia? There were others as well, you know, African guys or colored guys, whatever that might have been. Did you find that your process of the way that you played and the things that you did were alongside them? Did it sort of like bring out the best in you, or did you find that it was quite an adaptation to play with someone who plays quite differently, or had he already been honed as a grey boy then, and an understanding of how to go about playing in a rugby match?
Are you talking about as individuals?
Yeah, well, as a unit too, but also as individuals. You know, I mean, I know because, you know, Sia spent a lot of time with your family, and you were at school with him. So I use Sia as an example. You know, he was one of many other guys. But how did you find it? Because we never had that, of course. You know, we never had people of color that were with us at school when I was at school. And I just wondered about that. And I say that because I played the very first time I played a match with people of color, and I did play a couple of them, was for the South African 15 against the All Blacks in 1976 at Newlands. And we had a guy, Ambrose Boner, I think his name was, from Border. He played for a black guy. The fullback, Ronnie Lowe, was a colored chap. Toto Tsotsobe played on the left wing. He was his daughter and played for South Africa, Noms Tsotsobe, and Lonwabo, his son, played cricket for South Africa in your time. So these guys came into our mix, you know, and when we were preparing for the game, it was like quite different because they had different attitudes to certain things. So Ronnie Lowe at fullback used to play with a sweatband. He was a very talented guy. He made an awful error during the game because I think to a certain extent that was the way that he played. The All Blacks had a penalty kick at goal, which just missed the upright, but they had a good chase, a bunch of chases after the ball. And Ronnie caught it, and he started running from outside his in-goal area. Because that was the way that his people played, you know. They see an opportunity and they go, you know.
Yeah.
And we see that with some of the guys these days as well, you know, whether it's a Curtly Arendse or Cheslin Colby or whatever. You see these guys go. And what happened was he got tackled, the ball was turned over, and they scored a try. And they ended up, the game was, I think they won by 6 points or something. It was quite a tight game. So it was an adaptation in some ways, because Ronnie was saying as well after the game, you know, that's the way we play, you know. but it wasn't the right decision. He should have dotted it down. It would have been a 22-meter dropout or 25-yard at the time. Um, so I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. I'm just saying, how was it, or would you say that, well, we've experienced that right through school from, sub A type of thing, when you were at Selborne or whatever it might. I don't know if there were adaptations that were needed, or if the question is even relevant for you
Yeah,
guys.
well,
It's a great question.
It
I
is a
think it's a
good
great
question. But you probably hit the nail on the head there with in terms of it was always just the norm for us. So whether it be Selborne or Grey, it was just always how we were. But there were definitely some differences. Now, if I look at Sia, for example, I'll just take Sia. Sia wasn't very good up until about late under 15, and he started to grow, and he discovered he had a handoff and a step. And then he went away for that summer holiday and he came back in under 16, grade 10, and he had shot up. He was bigger, he was stronger, he had gone through his growth spurt. And he became a phenomenal rugby player overnight. The three best rugby players I've ever seen play at school level were Robert Eberson, Nick Costa, and Seo Kolisi. There was nothing those boys couldn't do on a rugby field. And there were certain things that the African boys would do that were maybe not the norm for us, but it became the norm in terms of the process. So you see Sia before Springbok games dancing, singing down the tunnel. That's very much how he was at school as well. And for the white boys, that wasn't necessarily the norm, but because Sia was in the locker room, it became the norm.
Yeah, okay.
So my process was sitting at home listening to World in Union, for example.
Yeah.
We got no rhythm, Mike. We got no
but
rhythm.
but you say that. I remember Sia coming and then listening to that song with me as well. So it became a part of his process. And our processes became like a mesh, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why this is a great question. That's why this is a great
Everyone
question.
was feeding off each other.
Yeah.
I learned from Sia, Sia learned from me. And not just me, I use me as an example. He learned from everyone, and we learned from everyone. And we all took little bits, like the freedom to play, from the African and the colored boys, then sprinkled down onto the Caucasian lads.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So
Yeah.
for me, obviously, it might have been a bit different for you because it wasn't the norm. It wasn't how it was for you in the 60s.
Yeah.
So when it became, it's like, I guess, when you first go overseas and play overseas, I'll never forget the first time I played an Espoir game for Stade Francais, Jeff. The very first game. Obviously, I can't speak French at this point, Gav.
Yeah.
Before we're about to go out, normally before a game, I'm pretty relaxed. I might listen to music, I might not, but there's no shouting and screaming. And the first game, just before kickoff, the French boys started punching each other, headbutting the lockers, slapping each other.
Yeah.
Everyone's different. Yeah, bro, it was like WWE WrestleMania. But
Yeah.
so you learn from everyone, I guess. But it was a great, looking back at it now, Sia was a big influence on me because he progressed and I wanted to be where he was in terms of Craven week sides, junior contracts, first team, playing at that level. So he did elevate everyone. But yeah, I guess it's hard to answer in its entirety because it was just the norm for us. But
You also bring up the verbal side of things, and it makes me think back to my days at Adidas, and one of our guys that we sponsored internationally was David Beckham.
yeah,
And I was chatting to David one day on one of the trips I had to the UK with Adidas, and I asked him, I said to him, what was the scariest moment you've ever experienced in football? And without a moment's hesitation, he said, what's the name of that stadium in Durban? I said, Kings Park. He said, yes. When we came out of the changing room, there were all these black guys there singing this song. and it was absolutely scared the living daylights out of me, because again, you know, singing before you go onto the field or as you're going onto the field is also not a Caucasian thing, I don't think, you know. So, and again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it's great, you know, that is the way it is. So those are the sort of adaptation things that you guys would have if you needed to adapt to them, which we didn't have at all. Yeah, we didn't experience
I
that, you know.
completely understand. But I want to actually get into your journey in commentating. I know Jeff wants to talk about like the players that you've seen and how you've seen like the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s. But just before that, I read on the Grey site you've been called the unluckiest player to never wear the green and gold because you obviously sat on the bench for the test against the Lions and the test against the All Blacks, and we've just touched on the bench how it wasn't necessarily the norm to go on if you were on the bench. How was that experience? Was that disappointing? Because if someone gets picked on the bench, you know, today for the Springboks, chances are they're going to make their debut. So it's a proud moment.
Yeah.
What was kind of going through your head that you've got this? Did you wear the Springbok jersey on the bench or?
Yeah.
So
They had everything except the blazer. Yeah. So yeah, it was again, you know, if I think back to that time, it was quite disappointing, you know, but I think there were a lot more people that were just more disappointed than myself. But I can remember the nights that the team was going to be announced. And remember, there was no television or anything like that at the time. And I remember lying in bed and thinking that hopefully tomorrow morning our telephone, now you would have a home telephone, you know, those old telephones. You'd have a home telephone and it'll start ringing early in the morning if I've made the team, you know, and the phone never rang. And then there was a huge outcry because that was for the team that was going to France at the end of 74. And they picked a guy. I mean, I'd been part of the setup there. I was 21 years of age. They picked a guy who was 32 years of age, Andre van Staden from Northern Transvaal, to go on that tour. And that was where it was like a massive outcry. Anyway, I mean, the selectors chose what they thought was right, and we ended up having a decent tour after being smashed by the British Lions, you know. So yeah, that was disappointing. But, you know, I always had other things too. You know, we had these overlaps of season. You must understand that when you're playing cricket and hockey and rugby at a high level,
unbelievable.
It's you don't stop with one season and then start with the next one. You know, you actually have to, while the guys are busy with cricket nets, you know, I'm still playing sevens or still playing even provincial rugby sometimes, you know, and then you join them later and vice versa as well with the end of the cricket season, and then hockey's got to fit in as well. And so yeah, I had a lot of replacements, a lot of things that would take up my mind, you know, because I think everybody gets to a stage where you're going to stop playing. Excuse me. And I retired quite young. I was 27.
Okay.
And which was very young in those days to retire, you know.
From all sport, Gav?
No, that was just from rugby.
Just rugby, okay.
Yeah. And I recall going down to a rugby practice at the police ground, which was right next to Old Grey, and driving there, it just like dawned on me that I actually didn't really want to go to practice. I didn't really feel inspired, you know. And that was sort of when I took the decision. But it was also taken for me a little bit because I was then made captain of the EP cricket side, and that brings a whole new dimension as well of, you know, requirements and stuff. So I had something to replace it quite quickly. Excuse me. And I didn't actually. I mean, I stopped playing, and I said, when you stop playing, stop playing.
Yeah.
Don't try and be clever and come back. Well, I can tell you now that it was 5 years later. I'm on a business trip to the UK with Adidas, and the guys heard that I was coming over, and I didn't know the English guys at Adidas UK, and the one guy's name was Robin Money, and Robin played fullback for Leicester. And he sent me, remember, we didn't have cell phones and that, you know, so it was like a fax, or, you know, unbelievable. And it said that he plays for a team called Wilmslow in Cheshire, and would I like to play in the game? And I sent a thing back, and I said, Robin, no, I've retired 5 years ago, you know, so I mean, really not for me, you know. And he kept plugging me, and you know, eventually I just said, look, no, I mean, I'm not gonna, I can't play, you know. And we flew over there, and I landed in Manchester, and of course, as usual, it was raining, absolutely peeing down. And he said, you know, we're running a little bit short of time, do you mind if we go straight to the ground? And I said, no, that's fine, no problem at all. So we got to the ground, and Steve Smith, who played scrum half for England, was in the team as well, in Robin's team at Wilmslow. And he said, hell, we've got an issue, eh? He says, we've only got 14 players. And one of our centers, unfortunately, can't make it. He's cried off, he's ill. And I thought, hey, hang on, there's something on the ball. So Robin looked at me, and then he brought Steve Smith along as well. And I didn't know Steve Smith at the time, and he said, come on, please. I mean, we can't play with 14 men, you know, this is an important game, you know. And guys, I really don't want, but I'm going to have to play. I mean, I can't let you guys go and end up losing, and then we got an issue. And strangely enough, a pair of Adidas boots came out of the boot of the car. Yeah, exactly my size. Exactly my size. I found this all out afterwards. We went on the field. I've got a photograph of us sitting in the bath afterwards with a couple of beers. And this picture shows this guy with a very tan skin and a whole lot of palms as white as anything. Who's that darky in the team there?
How did you play?
You know, I thought, I've got to be clever here. So I said to the guy who was playing fly half, I said to him, listen, don't give me any hospital passes, you know, and if you need someone to kick, I can kick as well. I played a lot at fly half, you know, so and so I was catch and pass and that, and then I saw a little bit of space, tramp, go, you know, got through a gap, got along, pass out, right wing, scored in the corner. I thought, oh, this is great, you know.
Yeah.
I climbed in, like you won't believe. And the next morning, you know, I thought, I'm not going to be able to even get out of bed. And I was absolutely fine. I so enjoyed it, eh? That's after 5 years, eh? So I flew back to South Africa eventually. And Bossy Clark, who was an old Queenian, played for Western Province on the wing. Actually played fullback at school for Queens. Bossy was trying to get me to come and play for the Villages Old Crocs.
Old Crocs.
And I was also giving him, no, I'm finished with rugby now, you know. And he sent a message to me in England saying, listen, we've got a game against Strand or something. And it ended up, I was actually on a plane coming back when they were playing this game. And he ended up tearing his bloody ACL.
Oh.
At his age then, I mean, we were, how old was I? I was in my 30s at that point in time, you know, and stuffed his knee up quite badly, you know, and I said, there, decision taken, you know. And luckily there are other sports that I could continue, you know, and do. So it's a lot of fun.
So when did you start your commentating then?
So then the whole commentary thing was an interesting one, because almost quite soon after I'd retired, I was asked, somebody said, why don't you see if Gavin Cowley is interested in commentating? You know, he speaks quite well and he's got this and that. Anyway, so that was with the SABC at the time. So I had to go and do a game, an audition at a game at Newlands. It was a club game between, I can't even remember which teams were there, but one of them was from Stellenbosch, not Marty's, somebody else, and a local team here. So I got to the ground, and I knew nothing about this now. What do you do? You know, how does it work? What is this fruit machine in front of you? How do you push? What do you do? So the guy came and explained it to me. Now, I'm not digitally very coherent. So, you know, I'm now asking questions and saying, yeah, but what happens if I push that? He said, no, then the people at home can't hear you, but the director in the outside broadcast unit, the OB van, he can hear you. But only push it if you need. And if you want to cough, push that as well, because then it doesn't go through. Okay. I said, well, so where's the program? No, there's no program. You know, they used to have those programs in those days, cost 5 cents with all your names on it. No, there's no program. So I said, but I don't know these players. I don't know who these guys are. So I said, don't you know any of them? I said, not a single one. I mean, I've looked at them, you know, because the guys didn't used to warm up on the field in those days. You'd warm up in the changing room or somewhere else, but you didn't come onto the field, which is probably quite strange for you guys. Yeah, it like ended up, you know, so he said, well, just make up any names.
Make up names.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm going, you know, so the young poppies with them all now, and Peter Olivier, and I just threw all these names in. And you know, when I'd finished, I tell you what, when I'd finished that lot, I was sweating like a pig. I thought, oh, no, I think I've blown it, you know. And I got a call on the Monday. It was a Saturday. On the Monday to say, we want you on board, you know. So okay, well, there we go. So that's where it started, yeah. And remember, in those days there weren't a lot of games. Not like now. I mean, it's so packed now. Yeah. The itinerary and the year. There were you only played like about 11 provincial games in the course of a season, and there weren't all the derivatives. And Jeff, you know, there was no sevens at that time as well. It was just starting to come into the mix, you know. And the very first time I broadcasted was with Chick Henderson, who did the 95 World Cup final with me too. And I was next to Chick. I was the expert opinion. He was the commentator. And it was the 1987, was it 88? Craven week in Port Elizabeth, where there was a deluge and the field was just like a swamp. Just unbelievable. And I recall that week there, seeing this guy playing center for the Western Province, what did they call them? The Western Province League team. So basically, mostly colored guys, you know. Yeah. Guy playing center there, and his name was Chester Williams.
Oh, yes.
And he like stood out, eh? He like really stood out, you know. And I always remember that Craven week for seeing this guy and saying, who is that guy, you know? We didn't know who he was at that point in time. And, of course, he came good later on, you know. So that's where it all sort of started. And I'm just having a look the other day. Somebody said to me, how many times have you commentated rugby matches? And I went and added them up because I've got all my records, you know, that I keep. Obviously, when I'm commentating, I've got a sheet of names and comments and all that sort of stuff on. Just over 1,000. 1,000 games.
Yeah. But that is incredible.
I'll tell you something. If Gavin Cowley or you played and mentioned your name or had a story about you or knew about you when you were playing in a Craven week, or, you know, it was huge. I remember if I was always, as a young South African, we know how it is. The schoolboy rugby is huge, and you watch rugby religiously. That's another thing that's probably different to our generation, is we get so much rugby to watch and to mold your game on someone you're watching, or you understand. But as a youngster, I would say I was a obsessive, not the most talented rugby player, but the obsessiveness to try and make it, or the daydreaming of doing that. And to get those commentators to come to the Craven weeks was huge for us, huge for me. And if they would speak and say your name, oh my, I would record it, rewind, play it again. What did he say about me? He really thought I had a good game. He mentioned me. He's having a good game. This young Williams from Border or whatever. And those are the impacts that you actually have on the generation. You probably know that, but for me, because I'm such a nostalgic bugger, I love that sort of ethos and the history. And when you get these commentators that commentated on the World Cup final, they're commentating on you in the Craven week. And I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
this too. I used to watch on SABC all the rugby games. So we used to watch Hilton College against the Michael House, and there used to be a commentator. Was it Chick? Who used to commentate on the SABC sport games back in the early 90s, or no, after
Chick
90,
Henderson.
98, 99 would have been those sort of times.
Yeah.
He was
Chick
old.
Henderson.
Yes, it was him.
Yeah.
It was him. Yes.
Yeah.
Ultimately, yes. His voice was like the
Yeah.
most. When you hear his voice come talking about the team sheets of the two teams, Michael House, you would sit there I was probably 11 or 12 during 98, 99. And my granddad was a huge Queenian, and he loved schoolboy rugby. He loved schoolboy rugby, Hellgott Miller, Free State, and the Springboks. And we used to sit there, and SABC used to come on a Saturday afternoon, and you see the SABC thing come on, and the commentator would start talking. You're probably there, but it was schoolboy rugby. And man, oh man, it's in my mind, and I'll never forget that. It's huge. It's such a
that passion as well, you know, that I mean, over the years, if one thinks about, you mentioned Hellgott Miller. I said to Hellgott, who I got to know quite well. I never played against him, of course, but we sponsored him. He was part of our sponsorship stable at one stage too. And he said to me, and you know, as he said, his English is not very well. So he said to me, in Afrikaans, of course, that he wrote a letter to me when he was at school. He was 8 years old, and he liked my rugby.
Wow.
And I said to him, Hellgott, can you? Okay, I can work it out with your age and that sort of thing, and what year that was, you know. And my mother, I mean, in this study of mine, I've got scrapbooks and photo albums and all the fan mail and stuff in here as well. My mother kept all of this stuff for me, and I'm so grateful for it, because I love going back through this stuff. I'm a bit like you, Jeff. I'm quite nostalgic too. And I went through and I found that letter that he'd written in longhand, Hellgott, asking me if I could please send him a photo of myself and my hand sign signature. He called it a hand sign.
Hand sign.
And you know that you sort of start realizing then the influence that I mean, you know, even as a commentator, you know,
definitely
you can influence people's lives. And that's why I've always believed it's really, really important to be careful when you're verbalizing things, that you are not overly critical, but if you are, that you're constructively critical. So you've got to call it as you see it. I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, Warren Brosnian sent me a thing the other day. So Warren commentates with us too, you know. And this little clip was me on his Springbok debut at Loftus. And I said, you know, there comes Brosnian like a bull in a china shop, you know, a madman at his best, or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, Bros, I'm sorry, it sounds a little bit, you know, like I was a little over the top with that. And he said, no, it's great that. Thank you for that, you know. So, but I think your choice of words is really, really quite important sometimes in commentary. And obviously also making sure you don't swear and do that sort of thing. I mean, I remember saying as well at some stage, these guys look absolutely knackered. And when I said that word knackered, I sort of, was that the right word? Because you know what knackers are.
Yeah, exactly.
You do. You should know. You've got a pair of them. So sometimes, you know, when you're using, and Wynand Klaasen, who captained South Africa in rugby, he played in my era, and he commentated with us for a while too. And he had a fight with a guy one day because an English professor, Afrikaans professor at Tukkies University, phoned the SABC and said that this guy, Wynand Klaasen, has got to stop talking about a tackle. There is no such a word in Afrikaans. This is now all Afrikaans, you know?
Yeah.
And Wynand said, daar is nie 'n ander woord vir dit. There is no other word for tackle. You know, a laagvat is the Afrikaans word, or a doodvat, or whatever the Afrikaans. He said a tackle is a tackle. That's it, you know. But again, you can see how you can influence people. There's obviously a linguist, a professor at the university, and his language is not being utilized properly. So he has an issue with that, And then somebody else says, yeah, but that guy Cowley, he's very much a Western Province biased guy, or whatever it is. So, which I'm not. I mean, I'm down the middle, absolutely down the middle when I commentate. I do not allow myself to go one way or the other. Deep down, I still have obviously a heart for Eastern Province, because that's where I played. But if they were playing, it would be the same thing, So you've got to balance those things, and ultimately, there are going to be people that don't like you. I mean, I'm sure there are. We've all got that. But if you can influence some people's lives, even if it's in a very, very small way, especially young people, who are like thirst for learning and that sort of thing, and have your passion that you mentioned, Michael's passion, and that if you can help those guys, that's great, And so that's why preparation becomes so important in commentary, In the days of you Bladen, I've just done a little video clip for him now. It's his 80th birthday this weekend. We used to do like 6 to 8 games a day, one after the other, ding, 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 like this, And you've got all these names in that, And there's a Jeff Williams, and there's a Michael van Vieren, and we don't know the guys, But you've got to try and make sure that you identify correctly, because their family's watching as well. Yeah. And if you call a guy Williams and he's actually not Williams, he's Pochenpoel or something, it's a bit of a slight on the family, isn't it? So make sure you prep properly and that you be careful,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I get into, we want to go through like players you've seen at Craven Week and kind of like journeys you've really taken keen interest in. But what I'm quite interested to just ask is, you're obviously involved with that 95 final as an expert commentator, you said, or analyst. What did you call it? Expert?
I was the commentator, and Chick Henderson was the expert opinion.
Oh, okay. How did that? Because obviously that was massive for South Africa. You've got the nod to be, essentially the voice that's going to be immortalized for forever. How was that day? How was the build up to that? What was that experience like? Because for people that may not know, South Africa had just become a democracy a year prior. It was the new South Africa, and here we are beating the mighty All Blacks with Jonah Lomu on the left wing, and you get to call it play by play. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, no, it was a great privilege to be there. It really was, and I enjoyed being with Chick too. He was just such a great guy. He was such a great rugby man, Yeah, there are a lot of things happened on that day that we were not familiar with. So we didn't know that Nelson Mandela was going to arrive at the stadium wearing Francois Pienaar's number 6 jersey.
Wow.
Which was a huge thing, If you look at that crowd and you compare that crowd, so full house, 60,000 people, and you say, well, why are there so few black people there? If you compare it to today. And I think to an extent it was a limitation time-wise, but we were still getting into it, as Michael says, with the democracy and that, we were still getting into the swing of things. And rugby still had a bit of a dark past in some ways for a lot of the African people, So there were things that happened on that day that we only found out about sort of like afterwards. But I can remember some very, very distinct things. That I can remember the tears in Chick Henderson's eyes when we sung the national anthem beforehand, and then at the end of the game he was like quite broken. So I had to do a lot of the talking, because I couldn't pass it to him or ask him a question because he was blubbing, I mean, and he had a habit of digging in his ear with a pen like this. I don't quite know why. I've never known why. And I can still picture him sort of like, but keeping an eye on the game and whatever, and digging in his ear with this thing. But what a day. What an incredible day, And I just thought that we had a huge opportunity to maybe accelerate the advent of the democracy and the coming together of people. And it didn't really happen perhaps as quickly as what everybody would have liked it to have happened. But what a World Cup that was, you know. If you look through that World Cup, you know, and I was part of most of those things, you know, the opening game here against Australia.
Wow.
And I was walking down Newlands Avenue with a guy called Bill McLaren. You might have heard of him before.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
The voice of rugby.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we
You
just
sound
heard
like
this.
that in real life, Gav.
Huh?
You sound like that just speaking normally.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what.
Legendary
No,
voice.
well, I mean, you know, Bill's he's like such a special guy and such a nice person. You know, he was a school teacher. And we heard this roar in the stadium at Newlands, you know. And then we just heard this call of Madiba, you know, Madiba, Madiba. And he'd arrived at the ground, and Bill turned to me and he said, that man's going to win the game for you against Australia today.
Yeah.
And I had my doubts because I really didn't think, you know, Australia were world champions at the time.
Yeah.
They had a great side. And I really didn't think that that would happen, but it did happen, which is brilliant, you know. And then we played Romania. We didn't score a lot of points against them. And then somebody said to me the other day, who was the vice captain of the Springbok team in 1995? And I said, I have to double check on that. I think I know who it is, and I'd have to give him a phone call to verify it. But I'm not sure. And he said, no, because he doesn't know. So he said, Adrian Richter was the captain of the Springboks in the game against Romania. Francois Pienaar wasn't playing in that game. So presumably he must have been the vice captain. And I said, no, I don't think so, because he wasn't going to be in the test side that plays the big games. Anyway, nobody had the answer. Do you know who it was?
Was it a
I
Scalbonian?
think of what was the backline? It was Joost, it was Joel. Was Henny Leroux 12?
Henny Leroux was playing 12.
Yeah.
I would
Yapi
say,
Mulder,
if I had to put money on it, I would say it was Henny Leroux.
Henny Leroux.
That would be my guess. Or Juba.
Okay. I'll give you a clue.
Okay, give us a clue.
He went to two schools, Rondebosch Boys High and Maritzburg College.
Joel.
Yes.
Yep.
Joel Stransky was the vice captain of the side. So I phoned him just to verify it. And he said to me, he said, yeah, but it wasn't important. So I said, why not? He said, because we had a full management team. Morne du Plessis, Francois Pienaar, Kitch Christie. They didn't need me, you know. So he was actually the vice captain, yeah, officially.
Wow.
And then, you know, we went through that tournament. Then we had that game against Canada in Port Elizabeth, where the lights went out.
Yeah.
As the guys were going to come out onto the field,
Load
the
shedding.
floodlights went. And, you know, floodlights, you can't just switch on and off.
First day of load shedding.
Yeah. Good bout of load shedding.
Yeah.
So that game I was doing that game with a guy called Russell Fairfax, who's an Australian. So we had to bide our time because the SABC had no footage to show. There was nothing they could do. So we were just talking about our golf and and this and that and whatever it might be. And then, of course, that game was where Peter Hendricks was basically out of the thing, and Chester Williams came in because it was an all-white team prior to that.
Yes, that's why Chesney came.
Yeah. And so we had that, and then, of course, we had that debacle in Durban in the semi-final against France.
Oh, my goodness me, yes, the French.
I tell you something, in that game, I mean, they were a millimeter from scoring a try.
I was just about to ask.
A lot of people say that was a try.
I heard Benazzi scored that try.
Yeah, they felt that they had. But, you know, the fact that that game took place was quite remarkable, excuse me, because there was a deluge of water. And, you know, Kitch Christie, who never lost a test match for South Africa as coach, won every single one. He used to phone Orlando Disney the week before a game to get the weather report for wherever we were going to be. Apparently they have in Orlando in the US, they have the very best thing when it comes to weather prediction.
Yeah.
And he knew that it was going to rain over that weekend, and not just rain, but heavy stuff, you know. So he picked his side, and everybody asked why he picked Mark Andrews at number 8. And it was for that very reason, that the weather conditions were going to be as they were. Well, it was so wet there, it was frightening. And I can still see Louis Late, the president of South African Rugby at the time, walking in these beautiful brogue shoes on the side of the field with a broom, sweeping the water off the field.
Do you know what,
the ref wanted to call it off, and he was having none of that, because if it had been called off,
you would have been gone.
We were gone because of our disciplinary record, and somehow that game took place, and what a game, eh? So it was a whole World Cup, not just that final against New Zealand, that actually was so inspirational, and so great for our country ultimately. Very special times, yeah.
Just that I want you to picture this. So my brother, he played with me in France. And about 3 weeks ago, I'm sitting on the front stoop and I'm sweeping the stoop off. And he looks at me and goes, "You're like one of those mamas in the '95 World Cup." That just shows you the tradition. You know what I mean?
Those pictures, yeah.
They shipped in a whole lot of brooms.
Yeah, I'm sweeping with the broom, and he says to me, "Hey, Jeff." He laughs at me, and I look at him and say, "What you laughing at?" He says, "You look like one of those mamas from the." It's iconic, those photos and pictures.
Yeah.
Of everyone trying to sweep off the rain from the pitch. Crazy, man. I love to hear that. That's special to hear.
What were your, because obviously Jonah burst onto the scene and effectively skyrocketed rugby into the professional era single-handedly. What were your impressions of Lomu when he rocked up in South Africa in '95?
Well, he never scored against us.
No, but
not once.
You would have been nervous leading up to the final, though.
Yeah, no, you had to have a plan with him. So I got to know Jonah quite well because he was one of our sponsored athletes globally at Adidas, and a genuinely lekker guy, really, really nice chap. Taken away too young, but yeah, we had a plan for him. We had a plan, and I think that first up tackle was at Joost.
Yes, when he
broke through the middle and Joost just chopped him.
Just made sure that he didn't, get any legs behind him. And no, look, I mean, he was a freak, eh? Yeah. If you look at that guy, I mean, he was a massive guy. I've got a picture of me standing alongside that guy. And you see him, he's just unreal. And his strike rate was just so special. And when you have got a team playing against a guy like that, and you sort of almost offer more than one resource just to stop the guy, it opens up gaps elsewhere too, Yeah. But I think, again, Kitch Christie, despite the fact that he was very ill at the time and didn't live much longer than after the World Cup from cancer, they'd worked it all out, how best we were going to, we had a perfect day.
Yeah.
And, there was just, it was just so special, in so many ways. In fact, it makes me think of another game against New Zealand. In 1992, we basically came back into international sport. And we played 2 test matches, rugby tests. The very first one since 1981, against, and this is now, much, much later, against New Zealand. And the following week, we played Australia in 92. And what happened in 1991, there was, you guys might remember this, or you might have read about it or whatever. But in 1992, I was commentating with Hugh Bladen. I was the expert opinion. Hughie was the anchor commentator. And when it came to the national anthems, they played God Defend New Zealand, and then they played Destem for us. And it was this unbelievable. I mean, we were gobsmacked, both you and I, thinking, "Oh my God, what are we doing here?" And there was a huge court case in that after that, and with Mandela and Louis Late, and Louis Late's argument was that no South African Springbok team has ever been onto the field without singing the national anthem, and we didn't have a national anthem at that point in time that was all encompassing.
Yeah,
that was still the national anthem, and it caused so much trouble.
That's crazy, man.
Well, it's unbelievable,
And Gav, obviously, moving on quickly, just to I know Jeff was kind of keen to ask you about, like, obviously you've commentated at youth weeks or Craven weeks, under 19s, under 21s. Which kind of players have stood out for you? You know, going all the way back, and have they developed into great Springboks? What do you kind of remember that? How much
Yeah,
has
give us your top three there.
Of
Gav,
guys that have
please.
come through Craven Week or the juniors or whatever it might
just
be.
guys that you think that you can recall off the top of your head that really stood out for you as schoolboy?
You really
rugby
enjoyed,
fan?
yeah, I really enjoyed commentating on them.
Yeah, you know, there were a lot of the guys at that point in time were sort of maybe not known. You know, they hadn't become something yet, but there were always guys that stood out in terms of their sheer ability and their size, maybe, or their speed, or whatever it might be. You know, they're not a huge number of guys. Bob Skinstad would be one, I think.
Yes.
Guys that like really jump out at you. I mean, often the kickers would be, you know, guys that kicked well. So like a Jannie de Beer or someone like that, you know, there was a good goal kicker. And scrum halves quite often would stand out too. But you might say, like, you know, a youngster like Brent Russell, for example, you know. So Brent was, you know, he wasn't a late bloomer. He always had good ability, you know, and he had terrific pace, as we know. And those guys, but a lot of those guys never played Craven Week, but they came through afterwards, you know.
Yeah.
Like a Peter Rousseau, for example, who played in the third team at Paul Jim.
Yeah.
And then ended up becoming a Springbok, you know. Yeah, so it's I'd have to go through my books and have a look, because there's probably a few guys there that played that were that I don't recall having been at Craven Week, because not everyone was at Craven Week, you know.
I'm pretty sure it was your voice, but did you commentate on the Craven Week where Clyde Rathbone played for Natal?
Yes, I definitely did with Clyde, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because I was watching. There's a great page on YouTube called Real Rugby, and they've got clips from way back. And you are talking of, you are commentating on Clyde Rathbone and saying what a, you know, gem.
Sensational. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you another guy that was also really, really good too was Osterrand, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So Osterrand actually grew up in a little town. What's it called? In the northeastern Cape. In fact, the two Springboks have come from that little town. I've just forgotten the name of it now. But he was a prop forward. He was like a standout. And you know, if I think back to when I played Craven Week for EP, we were in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, in Salisbury. And you know, I've got my program from that was 1970. And I was going through after then, and I did the other day as well, looking through the different teams to see what names were there, you know, and guys that I didn't know who they were at the time. Like a guy like Daryl Bestel from Natal was played for them. Henny Becker, Springbok Lock, played for Boerland. So you start pick up all these names, you know, all these guys that that's the joy of having all this history around you, you know, that you can go back and see just was, you know, where it is. And sometimes you need reminders about things too. It's like with your dad too, Mike, you know, from a cricket perspective. Sometimes I forget about, you know, when he started and when he finished, and, you know, obviously with your movements, you guys moving around and that. And then I always just go back to my scrapbooks and whatever it might be, and then pick up, you know, that information. So, yeah, so I can't say to you right now that that there was those three guys, if we say three, those three guys were the definite standouts as far as guys that came through Craven Week and then went on after that. There were other guys that were very good at Craven Week that never carried on afterwards. They you know, you sort of look at a guy and think, shit, but this guy will go places. And then the next thing you hear, he's given up rugby or he's gone farming or whatever it might be, you know. So, yeah, I don't have a clear answer for you on that one, but it's a great question.
Are you still regularly involved with commentating on the Western Province and Stormers games?
No, I do still do games, but you know, I've had 34 years of this now. No, more than that, 37 years.
Greatest era of Stormer players?
Oh, yeah.
99.
What about them?
Bob Skinstad.
The greatest of all the
Greatest.
Stormers players.
When did you think was the greatest Stormers era or Western Province rugby era?
I'll tell you when that era. No, I'll tell you when that era was. It was in an era where people were quite resistant to change. And, you know, when I was at Adidas, one of the things that I did was I went around the country to go and sign up Transvaal, the Lions today, the Sharks, who were Natal at the time, and Western Province. Those were the three unions, and Free State, sorry, that I wanted to sign up, but I wanted them to change the jersey and to put 3 stripes on the side of the jersey. Now, those jerseys have come from time immemorial, so I expected a major backlash. And it wasn't really the case, to be honest with you. So Roger Gardner, who was heading up things at Natal at the time, bought into it. Believe it or not, Louis Late, for some reason or other, he quite liked me. He bought into it too, and we got Free State sorted out. But Western Province were tricky. They were a real sort of issue with the whole thing, you know. Now, what was the point that I wanted to make with that? Where were we?
You were talking about
the era.
Yeah, the era.
So the eras. Yeah. So I think in terms of eras, what really stands out for me, so I was talking about change, you know, and people being resistant to change. So, you know, the thing with Bob too, Skinstad, is he's like sometimes quite light years ahead in terms of his, you know, his creative thinking and his ideas, and he's a bit like Russie in a way, you know, comes with the lights or this sort of thing. But I tell you what, the Men in Black in 1999, 1998, where Bob was the driver behind that, getting the Stormers to play in black jerseys. This is Western Province, you know. Why are we playing in black, sort of thing? Well, everybody bought into it, and you know the song "The Men in Black," and you know, when I remember going down to commentate games there and looking around, and suddenly there were all these young girls that were never really part of rugby before that, you know, and there was music blaring, and it was like a real, like a show, you know. And the rugby was part of it. So he was a massive driver, and he was a massive driver there, but I think he might have also changed the attitudes and minds of a lot of other people too, because I remember the complaints that came, and I saw the look on his face, and I quite liked it. He was captaining South Africa, and he walked out, and the mascot with him, he rubbed his hair like this. Bob rubbed his hair and gave him a smile, you know, and said something to him. I mean, we couldn't hear what it was. And some of these like diehards said, you know, rugby is a serious sport. What's he doing joking with this youngster and that sort of thing, you know? But that was Bob. That's who he is, you know. That's he's that sort of person. And I like that, you know. I like people that are just maybe a little bit, you know, left-sided sometimes, or perceived as such by people. And Russie's like that too, you know. I mean, he's also different. He comes up with fresh ideas. So Bob was a driver there, and I'm sure that other unions have picked it up too. You know, in 1993, we were in Australia. You, Bladen, myself, and the late Chris Moller. And that was the last tour that we had, a proper tour where you played 3 test matches, and then you have, you know, the provincial games and that as well. And it was just so interesting, you know, the whole setup there, and the people and that. And I can still picture a game against Queensland Country, like a provincial game, you know. And the announcer at the game had come to me beforehand, and he said, "How do you say this guy's name?" So he pointed at the program, and I said, "It's Joost van der Westhuizen." So he said, "Can you repeat that slowly?" So and Juice, he called him Juice. but he couldn't say van der Westhuizen, you know, so it was like a real struggle for this poor bugger, you know. And 4 days later, we were in Brisbane at Ballymore for the test match there. And James Small got sent off the field. He's the first Springbok ever to have been sent off a rugby field. It was like amazing, you know.
Oh,
yeah. So So some really cherished memories, of things that happened there too, and elsewhere, of course.
These
Jeff,
guys,
did you play? Did you play in? Did you play your sevens in Dubai as well?
yeah, I played in Dubai three times, 4 times.
Okay,
So
quite a few times.
it was lovely. It was lovely playing
Yeah,
out there.
yeah. You guys, I'm just thinking of his name now. Played scrum half. He's now involved with the sevens team or somewhere else as well. You're a really good player in the English side.
Was it
Tom Mitchell, no?
No, it wasn't Tom Mitchell.
Ben
Um,
Gollings?
Ben
Oh my
Gollings.
goodness, very well known guy. Played plenty of sevens rugby. It's got
Matt Turner?
treasures.
Matt Turner?
No, it wasn't Matt Turner. I remember all those names. Yeah.
What year?
I'm trying to think of his.
Ben Gollings is the one that comes to mind as the most.
No, Ben Gollings played a hell of a lot.
Yeah, he would have played 10-4. He was 10 a lot of the time. What's his name, man? I'm trying to think of his name now. No, Dan Norton was a wing, obviously.
Yeah,
was he a scrum half?
I'm sure he was scrum half, yeah. And it's just slippy. Because you guys had you guys are a really good side. I'm just trying to work out whether I covered any of your games in Dubai, because I did a few of the tournaments in Dubai.
I'm pretty sure you did. I remember sending something to my old man when you were commentating on one of our games, and it was one of those moments like we're talking about. You say, but I remember you definitely commentated on me then. Yeah, and in PE, I think I don't know if you commentated in PE. I know Bob Skinstead commentated on me once, and it was like I scored a try against America, and I bumped off Colin Isles, and he was like, if that's how you're going to take someone on, then Jeff Williams just showed us how to take someone on. And I remember I was like 27 years old playing for England, and I was like, I can't believe Bob Skinstead just said that about me. And I was like, yeah. And we were in the pub afterwards, and I went up to him down in PE there. And obviously I lived in PE when I went to Nelson Mandela University. And I went up to him and I just shook his hand. I said, you don't understand how much it means coming from the Men in Black in 99. Because you talk about that. He was the first rock star in rugby. The smiley, guy, the left, like you said, the good-looking, charming bloke from Hilton College. Like, come on, the guy was clean-shaved, looked the part. When I was watching this, I was just like, what, 11, 12? Same as Mikey. And it's just like, you go gaga. The chicks are crazy. The teenage boys want to be you. And you're sponsored by Guinness, Adidas. It's the dream, Gavin. And you were commentating on him, and you probably saw this, like I said, front row seat with him taking the show. It's crazy, actually.
Yeah, he's also, Bob. I mean, I covered a lot of games with him too when he was broadcasting too. And at Newlands, we have a little funny place. Well, it doesn't exist anymore, but where we used to commentate from, like a sort of thing that juts out from the middle of the main grandstand.
Okay.
And you're not that well protected when there's rain, particularly if it's brought in by the southeaster. And I remember Bob, we like squeezed in there, and he had his paper and everything like that, and the bloody rain was coming in, and he took his shirt off and he was like holding it like this, and everything was smudged. And the words that came out of that guy's mouth, like you won't believe. He's a real legend.
He's a good commentator.
Yeah, wow.
But listen, Gav, honestly, I think we could probably talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, this is amazing, eh?
But I definitely think we need to get you on again.
Sure.
What about I spoke to Bob on LinkedIn, and we obviously we want to get him on, and he would love to get on with us and have a chat.
Yeah,
maybe getting you two on together would be something quite iconic, eh?
I tell you what, it would be really good. I mean, Bob's such good value too, and I'm sure he will. Those are the sort of guys that you want on there too, but also, who's quite sort of, I don't know how keen he'd want to do it, but do you know Gareth Wright?
Yeah,
yes.
I know who he is, yes.
Yeah, so Gareth is the kicking coach for the Stormers.
Yes.
And, they're having all these problems with Liebach and whatever now. And but his insights are actually quite good, It might be quite a serious side of things if you don't really want something that's too serious. You need a bit of fun as well. You know, there's a lot of guys around, eh? So
Oh, well,
if you want me to bounce anything off anybody, you must shout, eh?
please. Well, what we're doing is we're doing like little coaching segments where we'll
Yeah,
have coaches on for maybe 30 or 40 minutes discussing one
Yeah.
or two topics. So
yeah,
it would be great to chat to Gareth. But
yeah.
I definitely think we need to get you on again, Gav, because we could talk all that. I'm sure your rugby encyclopedia is endless. So
Wow.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. No, we could go on all night. You're right. There's just so many interesting things that have happened, and and also viewpoints as well. You know, how we see things and how the game's progressed. What's the future of rugby? You know, how do we see
Yeah.
it going? Is it going to become very gridiron driven or Australian rules, or you know, what are the things that are influencing the game? I suppose there's so much of that we could chat about, and those are all obviously personal thoughts that you guys would have and I would have.
Yeah.
You guys as the modern guys, me as the older one. In terms of where the game's going to, what are the important elements? What could we consider? And I don't know. Just the world is changing so rapidly, and you'll see even more rapid changes, I think, with AI and the introduction of that too now. So yeah, it's I think good to get opinions of people and thoughts from them, and also from a modern day perspective. A lot of people, I noticed that so many people ask me about why did the referee do that, or why did he give a penalty for that, or I don't think that was a yellow card. Uh, and you try and explain some of the very basic laws of rugby to people, and they actually don't really know it.
Yeah.
I mean, the three of us know because we played the game. Other guys, people, and especially a lot of women too, they don't always understand those things. So sometimes by sharing those things with people, especially the things that really stand out, um, is actually quite valuable. It's
Yeah.
educational as much as anything else. Um,
Very true. Very true.
so
Especially
yeah,
when,
just shout
we need
whenever
to
you.
get you on again and we'll discuss some topics and debate some topics,
Yeah,
especially like with Jeff, he's coaching Belgium Sevens now. I'm obviously developing that side of my game. It will be good to get insight from you, especially in terms of what you've noticed from coaches, watching from close or far that you think
yeah,
are, strengths, weaknesses and general traits that you think the best coaches have, because you will interact with those guys
yeah.
yeah,
uh, fairly regularly. And, guys like that tend to do have very similar traits when it comes to the successful ones and the guys that don't quite cut the mustard. So
yeah.
we definitely need to get you on again. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm cognizant of the fact that it's already going on 2 hours. And it
Oh,
For
is
feels
me,
it
though, Gav, I'm coming down to Cape Town with the Belgium team in November
okay?
from the 9th. I don't know if you're still down in Cape Town, but if you're around, man, I'll drop you a text. Maybe I'll grab a coffee with you, because I
Yeah,
think your idea around marketing and your business side of things could be quite beneficial to talk to you about just where we are with Belgium rugby and trying to get sponsors for
yeah,
them. Just I think in general it'd be great to have a coffee with you. But if Mike can give
yeah,
me your number and I can just text you up and we can. I know
yeah.
Matt Turner's down there. We're going to meet up together. It's going to be Anton Mulman from Hammies and Southwestern Districts. He's a rugby man from the
yeah,
Fischhoek
yeah,
area.
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
little group of people that I would love to catch up with. So
No, please do that, Jeff. It would be lovely to see you. I just want to mention as well as a parting shot too that which we haven't discussed at all, but I was helping the Czech Rugby Union
okay,
with their whole setup. So a guy that was actually at school with me at Grey, didn't finish at Grey, but he was with me for a fair bit. He's made a hell of a lot of money. He lives in Prague. Um, and through him, he was on with some of the rugger guys there. They got hold of me and asked me if I would lend a hand to them. And I said, look, not coaching. I really don't want to coach. That's not my game. No, we'd just like you to, just from a business perspective, look at our business plan and the sort of give us some thoughts on that. And so I used to go across there,
okay,
to
yeah,
and those guys, those East Europeans, they're all big, physical, strong people, but they lack our skill sets, because they don't
yeah,
grow up with the sport,
yeah,
and I spent a bit of time there, and try to hone their thing. Their women were actually quite good, to be honest. The men were average, but they were, they were physically strong people. And they've got a great heritage there too, which I didn't even know about. So I learned a lot from them, So I think a lot of those unions, we talk about Belgium now, for example,
Yeah.
I don't know if the women are also involved in Belgium.
Very, very. They're
Very
fully
much so.
professional. We actually are semi-professional. They are fully professional. They came third in Europe. Yeah, they came second. Sorry, in Europe. They're very strong. Very. They're trying to get on the World Series. They're trying to get there. So.
Okay. Yeah.
It'll be good to have a chat to you. The similar sort of ideas around, how you, because the big thing for us now is, I'm at the point with Belgium where they actually play rugby pretty well because of the French influence here.
Yeah.
So they can play. They've got a better core skill base than say, for example, the Eastern Europeans. So that's good. What they're lacking here is just identity. The Belge it's a very small nation, but they're some great players. So I think it'll be nice. We're training against the Blitzbokker, so we're going to work with Philip Snyman down there.
Okay.
So it'll be lovely to catch up with you and see what you think and how you could potentially. I could give you all the things over coffee and put down everything on what's happening at the union, and you could give me your best advice. It would be great. Yeah.
Well, you must also remember, too, that, the dynamics of the city of Brussels is changing dramatically. There's a lot of migrants and people that are moving in.
Yeah.
The domestic population of Brussels is lower than immigration. So there's a lot of people coming in, and a lot of those, are hungry people who maybe also have the physicality and the abilities to play the sport. But you have to create a sustainable model. I think that's the most important thing that you ideally need to achieve there. And the fact that your women are already professional is a good sign too, because obviously with the Olympics, this is where the Czech Republic came from. I didn't even know they played rugby, but that came from the fact that it's now an Olympic sport, sevens, and there's an opportunity for our country to win a medal. So that's like the shoot for the stars sort of thing, So I think that's very exciting, and it'll be good to catch up. So please, feel free, give me a shout.
Okay, cool.
What was your role with Adidas exactly? Because we didn't. Sorry.
So I was marketing director of Adidas, but prior to me joining Adidas, I'd actually been a sponsored athlete of Adidas for 10 years. So when I was still playing sport, I was sponsored by them, and then came in and then marketing director, and I was there, believe it or not, for 27 years. So, which for you youngsters is like a lifetime.
Sure, 27.
Next time we get you on, I'll be wearing Adidas.
That's right. That's why I put mine on. As you can see, they're my stripes there.
I'll text you my address, and you can send me a box of stuff.
I'll send you a parcel. Yeah.
No, okay. But before we say thank you, before we go, I have to just do this, Jeff. I'm sorry, because I got to put it on Instagram or something. You've got to give me your all-time Springbok team. I got to hear it. The all-time Springbok 15 that you've witnessed.
Your favorite personal.
1 to 15. Your favorite.
My favorite Springbok team of all time.
Correct.
Yeah, you can choose from any era.
Yeah, except that it would be wrong for me to pick someone who I never saw play. So if someone said to me, "What about Benny Osler?" Well, I've only read about Benny Osler. I don't know.
That you've witnessed or commentated on.
I've either commentated with, played with, or against, or what all time is. Okay. Okay. Well, a bit of a curveball, eh? I might need to think a little bit about this, but I'd start with saying, by a close hair, ball hair, they'd call it, eh?
Yeah.
Fullback. Andre Joubert.
Oh, yes.
The Rolls Royce.
The Rolls Royce, yeah.
The Rolls Royce. But I tell you what, I only saw him play once, but a guy called H.O. de Villiers would have also been in the mix. So he was a Springbok of some repute. A Dale boy by the league.
Yeah, a Dalian. Yeah, a Dalian.
So I'd have that's who I would have at fullback. Andre. I'd have Andre there.
Jeff, do you have any? You wouldn't, Andre? You happy with that?
Yeah,
me,
you must tell me what
Andre
you guys think.
amazing, amazing. Like you said, talk about class, left foot, connected with the left brain, fit as a fiddle. Could run for days. Just looked the part, man. You just, you know
But
what I
it
mean? The
depends.
That's it.
It depends who's kicking for poles for you.
Yeah, it does. And it's not poles, by the way, guys. It's posts, eh?
posts. Could be
Don't
careful.
forget, the rule book says
Ball
posts.
too,
not poles.
balls.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd pick.
Afrikaans translation.
Okay, Andre Jabir, 15. Who's your 14? Yeah.
You know, Andre Joubert's biggest shortcoming, and he made up for it, that you never really saw it. He couldn't kick with his right foot
Oh, you see?
at all.
But he had a
He was
lovely left
very
foot.
poor. But he was able to position himself that he never was caught napping as far as that's concerned, you know?
Yeah.
Very, very much so.
14?
How much?
No, you're 14.
14. It would be this would be an entirely a choice thing for me.
Yeah.
Cheslin Colby.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, yes. Thank you.
Thumbs up.
I love Cheslin, but it might not be the wisest choice, but he definitely a guy that I think is great for the game of rugby. He's an inspiration. He's a brilliant player, absolutely brilliant player. A lot of guys would want a guy like James Small to be considered, you know, and a guy called Ray Mort.
Yeah.
Yes. The Rhodesian. Oh, he was from Rhodesia.
Yeah, he was from Rhodesia. Yeah. Yep.
I think up until the explosion of Antoine Dupont in the last season or two, Cheslin was probably the best player in the world for me personally.
Yeah.
I love James Small, you see. The no growing up, I enjoyed old James Small. I thought he was like, dating the models. No, I liked him. He was like, but I'll go with Cheslin as well. Yeah. Okay.
Who's your 13?
My
13.
13. Only one guy. Jacques Ferry.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Jacques Ferry was an unbelievably good rugby player who was not given the credit that he should have been given. He was given plenty, but he could have been given a lot more. Shit, that guy was a good player. I tell you what, he was just magic. So he's my 13 without even a consideration of anybody else at 13.
And as a coach as well, I think he's got heaps and heaps and heaps of potential.
Good to hear. Your time at the Lions.
Yeah, I really enjoyed his way, his demeanor, his attitude. I definitely think, given the right situation, I mean, the Lions have come good. They look like they're on fire. I don't know what the result is, but
they've been going well. They have been going well.
I think Jacques Ferry is going to be a world-class coach if he's not already. So
yeah. Good choice, Gavin. Good choice. I'm with you there. Defensive.
A lot of people would be saying, "Oh, Dani Gerber," but I think Jacques Ferry pips him at the post.
He does. I mean, I played with Dani too, and obviously watched a lot of his games thereafter. And I mean, he was a magic player. So he's in the mix there. But when I look at the sort of guys that I would have wanted there, because I'll give you my 12, who will captain the side as well, and that's Jean de Villiers. Because I think the combination of the two of them would work really, really well too.
Yeah.
And there again, you could say there are other considerations, and there will be. There'll be a fair number of guys, but I don't know. For me, Jean, the fact that we work together now too, and I've always got on so well with that guy. He's a genuine natural leader.
Yeah.
And I think, when we get to the hooker position, which Michael, you'll tell us your thoughts there too. But if it is going to be a John Smith, for example, you say, well, why isn't he the captain of the side? Toss up, maybe, and I just don't particularly like the fact that a captain's in the back line. I think the modern day needs are more to have a captain up front. And even in my time, it was pretty much the same thing. But that could be a toss-up either way, whichever way we go.
Oh, Jean for me, I got to spend, obviously, when the EP Kings went into administration in 2015, I went over to Leicester for 6 months when he was finishing up there. And it was as a young South African, I mean, I was still in awe of players even when I was playing with them. So when I was in the same room as him, it was a great privilege. He's the way he
Yeah.
carries himself. There's very few players in my career that I've played with that have had an aura about them. You know, when they
Yeah.
speak about an aura,
Yeah.
and there's three that stand out. Sergio Parise, he
Yeah.
had an aura. Courtney Laws at Northampton,
Yeah.
and Jean for me personally at Leicester. Obviously, you know, he wasn't there long and it was kind of the end of the road for him, just after the World Cup. But no, it was a great privilege to share a changing room with that guy.
Yeah, Jean de
Yeah.
Villiers, all rounder. Just, you know what I mean? He's just one of those
Yeah.
guys, could do it all, could play any sport probably, could
Yeah.
run the 400 meter, could run the 100 meter, could pick up a cricket ball, could throw the discus. You know, everyone wanted to be him.
This is a
Yeah.
bit
People
embarrassing.
wanted to be with him.
I used to have a poster of Jean de Villiers on my bedroom wall. It was a poster of him on the end of year tour with his frosted tips. I used to take that poster to my hairdresser and be like, "Yeah, this is what I want."
That's
No,
what I
Michael.
want.
He had a bit of a better hairline though, so I couldn't quite cut it like Jean
Oh.
did, but he good choice. Who's and then we're down to number 11.
11, yeah.
Who's your 11, Gav?
Gert Muller.
Okay, I've never seen Gert Miller. So
No, you wouldn't have seen him. You weren't born. So he played in my era, and was actually tailing his career in my era. So he'd been around quite a forceful left wing, brilliant, strong guy. Played for what was then Transvaal, the Lions. Yeah, very very powerful, very strong runner. So he would jump out for me. The other guys whose names would be thrown around would be Chester, for example. A lot of people would ask
Oh,
about
yeah.
Chester. You know, guys might even talk about Kurtley Orenser, you know, who's so dynamic as well.
Rana Banner.
Peter Hendricks, pardon?
Rana Banner.
And then Brian Abana, for example, as well. You know, Brian also dynamic. Difficult guy to leave out, eh? It's almost like that, you know, is it a De Villiers or is it a Fourie, Jacques Fourie or a Donnie Gerber? Is it a Brian Abana or
Preference,
I
yeah.
just I had played a fair bit of rugby against Gert Muller too, and then saw what else he had. He didn't maybe have the same sort of all-roundedness that Brian had. You know, Brian having played scrum half at school at Kes, and you know he fitted in so well. I mean, he could play in different positions, and you know, again, one must be careful that you're not swayed on your opinion by the number of test matches that guys have played.
Yeah.
Because you know that shouldn't be the yardstick, I don't think. It's just, you know, who's had the greatest impact. I mean, a lot of people will talk about a guy called Manikis Roo, who was also a great Springbok as well. John Gainsford. These guys were even before me, you know, before my era. Jochie Janssen. There were a lot of good guys around, but every position has a lot of good guys. And, you know, these are guys also, some of them that I'm mentioning, a little bit like Cheslin, but he's a, you know, as the Aussies say, he's a money man, you know. He's the guy that brings the people in to come and watch the game, you know, and he's dynamic and he's got a great strike rate, and you know he's a player of the world, as you say. It's like quite brilliant, you know. Don't ask me the next one.
Yes.
Jeff, who would your 11 be?
Who would my 11 be? The funny thing is, Brian Abana is a great player, but I like a little bit of flair. He was so good at being good. He was, you know, run straight lines, always there, working hard. It's difficult to say who I'd go with. Probably for me, again, Kurtley Orenser is just phenomenal. I just think he's so dynamic again. He's like a Cheslin, built like a pocket rocket, moves so well. And I think if you had to pick between the two in a match tomorrow, I'm choosing Orenser. He can just do so much. He's like Army Swiss knife.
Yeah,
The footwork, the movement, the speed. Where Abana was a pure competitor, and he was just lacking a little bit of that jouet, almost the movement, the Cheslin lateral movements with the Orance's lateral movements. That's probably why I go that way. Yeah.
You'd also get influenced, I think, sometimes by current players, because you're seeing a lot more of them. You see their influence too, and that's why I said, with test matches, Kirtley's played less than 10 test matches now. So why would you include him in an all-time great Springbok team, Yeah, for all the reasons you've mentioned now, terrific strike rate and all the things that go with that. So, yeah, there were lots of good guys. It's very difficult to pick a team, but you're picking a team on the basis of guys who've impressed you too,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, your halfbacks, your 9 and your 10.
Big one.
No, well,
This is where you earn your money, Gavin Cowley.
That's where you earn your money.
I tell you what, it's not too difficult to pick the 9, Farid Priya.
Oh, that's a tough call.
You left Joost out, eh?
Joost Faf's been good the last few.
No, it's only two. There's only two names.
I would go. I would pick Farid ahead of
de Priya. Come on.
Yeah.
Definitely Farid Priya. No question. Terrific rugby player.
Yeah.
He would walk into the Springbok team now. Walk into the Springbok team. I promise you now with Rusty there.
No, he'd be phenomenal. You're right. I'm dying to hear what you guys feel about 10.
Well, you've picked a fullback that can't kick, so you need a kicker.
Yeah, you need it.
Because you could, if you picked Monty, you could go Henry Honeyball or Butch James.
Yeah, you see.
Or if you pick France Spain, potentially you could go Andre Pollard.
We're going to score so many points. We don't need a goal kicker.
Yeah.
Andre, I mean, you've got Joel Stransky there in the mix. I mean, I don't really know any 10s. Nas Buerta. Yo, there's your kicker.
Yeah.
Another one that wouldn't get his pants dirty. I mean, that 10.
Who are you going with?
I don't ever. I don't think South Africa has ever had a truly world-class game-breaking 10 like a Dan Carter or Johnny Wilkinson. We've just had really good 10s. I think the closest we've got is like Pollard's been good, but he's good in the system.
Yeah.
Like good for the system. Sasha looks like a really good prospect. I think Mani Lebok plays beautiful rugby when he's on side. But I think in terms of like
your preference, my buds,
I would probably go Honeyball, bro.
Yes, you did it.
I like Honeyball.
I'll sledgehammer.
He used to cut like a battle axe, man.
What do they call him? Lam. What was it, Gavin?
Lem.
There you go.
Which is blade,
yeah.
Slicing through, yeah.
So we'll ask Jean de Villiers if he can kick for sticks, but we're going to win with the driving ball and scoring tries, boys. Yeah. No one's kicking for goal in this back line. Very successful.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're picking a team that basically going to score a lot of tries.
So would you go with Honeyball?
I would love to choose Honeyball because I like the way he played. And, he brought a different dynamic to the Springbok team when he became very much part of it, So if you look at, it's a very interesting point about, if you look at historically, what 10s have we had that have sort of been like absolute world-class world beaters, the Carters, the Wilkinsons of the world and that, Stephen Larkham's, there's just so many of them, and our guys have all been solid, stable. We had a guy called Pit Versace before your time and before my time a little bit as well. He was also a very good player. So you could sort of like sweep quite a few of those guys in. Andre obviously too. I mean, he's been a very good Springbok.
Yeah.
But if you're going to play the sort of rugby that the three of us would like to play, then I'm happy to go with Henry. Absolutely.
Can I just throw a dark horse in the mixture quickly?
Yeah.
Someone that I really liked, who I thought his career was cut short. I like Pat Lambie, man.
Pat Lambie. He had the touch again. Yeah, he had that touch, man. He made it look beautiful. Yeah.
But again, we don't have that world-class, unbelievable 10 like a Carter, like a Carlos Spencer. We just have guys that know how to win test matches.
I think Sasha's going to be our first mega superstar. I've seen him speak, you know, he's from Bishops. Seen him speak when he was 13 years old. There was that video going around. The way he plays, I know you say it is obviously we have to see with time, but I'm putting my neck on the line here and saying this guy's going to be a mega Springbok.
No, he's a natural.
Natural.
He's a real natural. Yeah, look, I mean, again, as you say, Patrick Lambie. So Patrick, I mean, he was a really good Springbok, but again, is he a flyer for a fullback? You've got to ask yourself, you know, where's he going to play? It's like Brent Russell, you know, where does he play?
Okay, so Pat Lambie, he burst onto the scene as a 10. If you think about back to that Currie Cup final when he handed off Skalkberger.
Oh, wow. What a game.
He was playing 10 for the Sharks there.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you put Jean de Villiers on his outside, Jacques Fourie, Juba at fullback.
You got a kicker too, eh?
Then you got a goal kicker.
Yeah.
But I mean,
it doesn't sound right though when you say Pat Lambie all time, the greatest Springbok fluff ever.
Well, you don't have to pick him. He's just a dark horse. I mean, he's probably not as like world or good as Honeyball would be, or maybe like a Butch James. But I thought he was just solid, and I think that under the right circumstances, he could have been really good for South Africa.
Yeah. No, he left the game early too, unfortunately. So with all the concussion and stuff, but I mean, no, he's a good shot. But again, it just shows how difficult it is to actually pick a team.
Picking? Are you picking Honeyball? You can't.
I'm happy to go. I'm happy to go with Honeyball. Yeah. Because I'm looking at that back line and I'm saying this is a team that's going to score plenty of tries.
Yeah.
You know, we've got some great assassins in that side.
Yeah.
Honeyball, number 1, you know, Jacques Fourie, number 2. They'll flatten a few guys, you know, and they're all disciplined players, so we're not going to get any yellow or red cards. You know, Joubert at the back. No, that's a very good back line. But I could pick probably, and you guys could also pick another back line that would be a strong one as well, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
But so we're going a little bit along the lines of favoritism, or so what sort of favorite? Who's your favorite guy?
Yes.
Well, we have a bit of that too, but I mean, so be it, you know.
Okay, now to the only positions that really matter on a rugby field, the forward. Okay. We'll start with our back row, Gav. Give me an 8.
Back row.
What? Your number 8.
Morne du Plessis.
Oh, wow.
He's a great Springbok.
But what?
No. It's your team. It's your team. I'm biased when it comes to 8s. My 8 is Bob Skinstad.
Yes.
All day. I pick him in my world 15. I pick him in my all-time 15. There's no Bob Skinstad's my number 8. But as it's your team, Morne du Plessis gets the nod.
Why would you not pick Bob at 7?
Because I'm going to pick Skulk.
Yeah.
Not at 6.
No, I think Sia deserves the spot.
6.
He's a back-to-back World Cup winner. He's on the Mount Rushmore of Springboks. So if I was picking this up,
true. Nice team, nice balance.
Like if you look at American sports, the guys are judged by how many rings they win or how many this and that. And you know, Sia to me is not the best player that's ever played in that position, but a captain that's gone back to back has got to be considered.
Yeah, there'll be some arguments from the past that they didn't play in World Cups, and it could have been the same with them too. As I said, I'd go with Morne at 8. I'd go with Skalk at 7. I'm very happy with that. But he would have someone on his heels called Jan Ellis. Jan Ellis was a great flanker as well. And my 6, you'll never forget. You will not recall or know the guy that I think should play at 6 for South Africa in this team that we're picking. This team that's going to score tries, it's going to do turnovers, they're going to do their bits. And I want to see if you guys could come up with a name. It's an unlikely guy.
Well, give us a clue.
Yeah, give us a clue. What do I think? Ruben Crew. No, it wouldn't be Ruben. Ruben was a tough man, but he was nothing like you explained.
Okay, just to clarify quickly. Sorry, I think I got the numbers mixed around because in the Northern Hemisphere, The
Yeah, open side is 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going. So you'd play Skulk as your blind side.
Yeah, 7, yeah.
So your open side, give us a clue. What's the clue?
He played for the Free State.
When? 100%.
Yes, that's the man.
Wow. He
The best
actually,
Frencher I've ever seen in South African rugby.
To be fair, 100% was destructive in that
yeah.
just post World Cup 2007 when you didn't have to release the tackler to jackal.
Yeah.
Honey Badger.
So
Yo.
he didn't need to release. So when he'd latch onto that guy, he'd just hold on and you couldn't move him off the ball. So him and Skulk and Morne du Plessis, who your line-out options? Because 100% ain't jumping in the line-out.
No, he's not jumping in the line-out. He's got other work to do.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that.
Okay, who your second rows then, Gav?
Yeah, second rows is in some ways quite difficult. In others, maybe not so much. 5, Kevin de Klerk. Okay, so that name won't ring a bell for you guys. Played my era.
Yeah.
Was actually president of Transvaal or the Lions.
Yes.
In fact, Mike, you must have
I
come
know the
across him.
name. I know the name. I've seen pictures of him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Super player. Absolutely
A
superb
giant.
player. So he's my 5. The jury's a little bit out on 4. A little bit out, but I'd probably going to end up with Bucky's. And you might say, why not have Victor as well, along with Bucky's? I just think also for the type of rugby we want to be playing, I need an enforcer, and I need I need the security of an all-round game from Kevin de Klerk.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to clarify, you've left out names like Victor Matfield, Eben Etzebeth, Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
So those are big.
In fact, Michael, probably in hindsight, it's another close call for me in many ways, but maybe Eben's got to be at 4, yeah, and not Bucky's. I mean, Bucky's would be right on his tail as well in terms of the game we want to play. But I think I would say Eben. There's a lot of people that would talk about, and I never really saw him playing, but Frick de Preer, for example, who was also very dynamic as a 4.
Yeah.
But no, let's swap that round. Let's go with Eben. Yeah, absolutely. I'm very
I'm
happy to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't have a bad game. That guy, Eben, is just unbelievable. He's a great team man too. It's absolutely brilliant.
Just to go back to Frick de Preer, my dad did some kind of like thing a few years ago to raise money. I don't know what it was, but they got like a Dani Gerber chair or whatever it may be, and they got molds of guys' hands.
Yeah.
I think he's still got it. He's got the mold of Frick de Preer's hand.
Yeah.
And it's a huge myth, Jeff. It is massive.
Yeah.
I've heard about his hands. It's nearly as big as Andre Venter's hands. Apparently, he also had huge hands.
Yeah, massive.
And Skalkberger too, senior.
Yeah.
Also
Like
got massive hand.
Frick de Preer was probably a little bit on the short side to be a really
he was.
good modern day second row, but he would have certainly fit in the back row somewhere, I think.
That was not, interestingly enough, when you talk about that, you must remember, you guys now, your generation are taller and bigger than our generation, who were taller and bigger than Frick's generation. So if you stand next to Frick now, it would be hard to believe that he was a lock forward. Okay, as you get older, you shrink probably a bit as well, but he's not a tall guy, not a very, very tall guy.
Just dominant.
So
wide
interesting little combination. That's so far so good, I think.
It's a good team. It's a good team. I mean, if you weren't picking on favoritism and purely skill, I reckon you would have got the sack by now. But
definitely, definitely.
We will back you. We'll back you now. It's to really test your rugby knowledge. We're going to the front row, so we can start at loose head. Who's your loose head?
I think it's got to be Oosterrand.
Okay. I don't think there's much argument there.
No, I
No.
don't think a lot of good guys around, but he really was stand out. He had a lengthy career. Came back, played in the World Cup. After he'd sort of like half retired, and he just showed so much character, and also very seldom had a bad game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
He was
I
phenomenal.
mean, obviously you've got Tendai, you've got Ox and Chair, you've got Kitshoff, but I think Osterant is legendary status.
For me, he's
Yeah,
a Springbok. When you look at the man, the name, the
He encompassed,
way his carear went, he's
Yeah.
it's an example of what a Springbok does.
Yeah.
Farms, comes back, wins another one.
Yeah, let me just go back to my farm before I come and win another World Cup.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Great shout. Okay, and we'll leave hooker for last because it's the most important position. So we'll go to the right side of the scrum. We'll go to your tight head.
Big call.
This is tough because, again, it's another position where I don't think we've had many world-class players ever.
It's a great comment, that, because I think in many ways that's true. Quite often, loose heads maybe a little bit more, but actual tight heads that have really stood out
Yeah.
over the years.
One
I don't know.
Frans Malherbe, you can't discount what he's done. He's been the rock of our scrum.
Yeah.
But I would never, like, in terms of scrummaging.
Kobus Visagie.
Yeah, but again,
Was he? I'm asking more.
He was a tight head, but he wouldn't.
Yeah, but was he the business?
He was good, but he wouldn't have got into the All Black. Like, you judge world class or like, when I talk about
world class is
every team in the world.
Yeah.
Like, Irben could get into every team in the world.
Yeah.
Jacques Marie could get into any team in the world, maybe. Like, even the Irish team, when Brian O'Driscoll was there, they would have found a place for Jacques Marie. You know what I mean? They would have.
I got you.
They would have moved O'Driscoll to the wing.
Probably. Do you want to win?
Yeah.
But like Tartet's like a tough position because we haven't, like, if you think about the 2007 World Cup, we had CJ van der Linde there. Again, great, like, Springbok, won a World Cup, but he wouldn't set the world alight, you know?
Yeah, you're looking for a legendary guy in a lot of ways, and a lot of people might ask some questions too about John Smith, because that's where he started his rugby as a tight head. But you've got to ask why he ended up as a hooker as well, and part of that might be because he wasn't really cutting it as a tight head at the time, and was remodeled into becoming a hooker. So, there's a lot of guys, that played in that position. The Barley Swats of the world, who was in the World Cup team at the time in 95. But guys that have really stood out, there isn't one that jumps out at me. I mean, I could mention lots of sort of different guys like the CJ van der Lindes of the world, but there's no one that I would automatically say, hey, that's my man.
Yeah. Same.
I don't know if you guys have got any.
Well,
what about Adrian Garvey? He stood out for that period.
Adrian
was another one. He was also a bit of a journeyman in a way, but I mean, he played Test rugby too. But but not really stand out, Not
exactly.
I think, like, in terms of scrummaging, probably Frans Malherbe would get the nod.
Yeah.
There's no one really, like, CJ might come close. I think CJ was probably better around the park. France is just there to scrum.
Yeah.
And that's fine. With your backline that you've picked, Gav, you need good go-forward ball, and you'll get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's forthcoming.
Now you're hooker. There's a few options here you could go. I'm sure.
Yeah, we've had some great hookers.
You're probably a big fan of, like, Uli Schmidt and guys.
I was just going to say, the first name you're going to mention is Uli Schmidt, but he's not going to be the guy that you would choose.
No.
But, okay, I thought so. But yeah, Uli was a great one. He was. There were many, many very good hookers before our time, both yours and mine. AB Milan was one of them, for example. Really standout guys, But I'm not really considering those guys because I never played with, against, or saw them play. I've just read about them, So we're a little bit biased in a way in that the team is more sort of more of a modern side, you know. I'm very interested to know whether you would choose this guy or not. Do you have a name in your head?
Yes,
Okay, share it.
Bismarck, 100%.
Okay, I, I did think you might raise Bismarck somewhere along the line, and I think Busy is, again, if you look at his career, uh, he was a really good Springbok. It's fine being a Springbok, but being a good one, um, and having the commitment and stuff that he had to the cause. My sympathies go to John Smith, because I'd say to myself, John Smith, good team man, possibly the captain of the side, maybe Jean de Villiers then the vice captain. But I don't know. I like Bismarck. I've always enjoyed his rugger. And I like to measure guys on the basis of how many poor games they have for South Africa. And he had very few. Very few.
I mean, in a close, like John Smith, again, has to be commended for what he did, as a captain and as a leader of that team, given the fact that group came off a torrid 2003 World Cup, torrid leadership, just a bad culture. So for him to turn it around so quickly under Jake and then lead us to the Tri Nations in 2004 and then World Cup in 2007, and we had a bad patch, if you remember, in 2006. And I thought he was a great leader. I think in terms of like Bismarck for me was incredible. The closest thing we've had to that is Malcolm Marx, but again, I think his throwing lets him down a bit, and he's not considered an out and out starter. He's obviously the bomb squad hooker. But no,
I like John Smith, and I'll tell you why. As I've gone into coaching, you realize how important a delegator is, and an intelligent man. And I think John Smith's very intelligent. We can see it. You can see when he's talking, he's articulate with his words. And rugby's part of that. You got to be able to blend people. And the way he tells a story, he's a storyteller. He tells a story about Bucky's asking for one more, one more.
Just one more.
Just one more. The way he tells that story is like iconic. And you think about this, he played tennis for South Africa, didn't he? He was a tennis player. He played for his school. You could see he had that natural ball skill. Pick the ball up with one hand at one time. I think it was a test match against New Zealand or Australia. He picked the ball up. Do you remember that pickup? Unbelievable. I love that about him. The small parts of the game.
Actually. But you've got so many leaders in this team. You don't need another one.
You need John to lead them. He's a leader of leaders. He did it. He did it with Victor. He did it with Bucky's. He did it with Skulk. He did it with John Smith.
Evans captained the Springboks. Okay, Faree's captained the Springboks. Jean de Villiers is captain. You've got leaders there.
He captained them. He captained them. He captained Eben.
Can you imagine your game plan if you have Bismarck, Heinrich Brousseau, and Skulkberger? The other team would have no ball, nothing, zero.
Yeah. Just about, I think.
They would have to send 5 guys into the breakdown, then all they can do is box kick.
Playing ability,
you know what you've got to think about as well, also just for fun, is a team of only captains.
Oh wow.
A Springbok team only with captains, and see if you can fill every position, which probably historically you can in some way or another, because some guys like Donnie Craven played in 3 different positions for South Africa. But that's quite an interesting one. But I've got another one for you guys, and you stay away from Google or anywhere else. But do you know that there are 3 guys that have played in 5 World Cups?
Yes.
Who?
So the Samoan is one. Brian Lima.
Brian Lima, correct.
Yeah.
Lima. Trying to think who would have done 5. Is there South African? France didn't get 5. France got 2007, 2011. He got close. 5 World Cups. It's going to be guys from small nations. So Brian Lima's one.
Smaller nations, let's call it.
Smaller nations.
I don't want to get cancelled.
There's not enough viewers.
You got a name?
I'm actually trying to work it out now. And Sam Whitelock, did he play in 5?
No, I don't think any All Blacks played in 5 World Cups.
He couldn't have. He won the
No,
double though. There wasn't
no,
a New
remember-
Zealand. The smaller nations then. It has to be the smaller ones.
Yeah.
Italy.
It might be Italy. What about Diego Dominguez?
No.
Or Lise Bergamasco? No.
No.
Okay, we have all the answers. Sergio Parisi.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm not sure which Bergamasco, one of the two brothers.
Yeah, Marco.
The flanker,
Marco,
yeah.
yeah. So that's very good, Michael. Well done. The 2 from Italy, 1 from Samoa.
Yeah.
Did it? You got them all.
Eh?
You got them all, my bad.
Yeah, I was certain. I know the chiropractor played in 5, who ended Derek Hogarth's career. Shame. Hey, Derek was another 10 we could have considered.
Get off your horse.
Only
Only
No, but
Liefling.
Sergio, I had an inkling, but
Yeah.
That's sharp, buddy. That's sharp, eh? That's good stuff.
Gav, I love my rugby. What can I say?
Yeah, no, that's good, boy. Well, it's a good test that. Just once again, just to show that Gray are always one step ahead of Selborne. You see?
No, but listen,
Well played. That was a good one.
Gav, we'll definitely get you on again. It's been, honestly, it's made
An
my
honor.
It's been an honor. You're definitely coming on again in the future, and we'll hopefully get you on with another. We'll try get another Grey boy on as well. So then Jim can really feel.
I think for me, from my side as a Selbornian, now I know why you've achieved all you've achieved. The attention to detail, your memory, nostalgia, it shows a lot. And in this conversation, it's the first time I've ever spoken to you. And I was a bit nervous to come on and have a chat with someone that you look up to and you've heard for so many years. But the way you do it, well done. So many years of service for so many young people. It's incredible. So it's an honor to talk to you, but also it's so interesting to listen to your stories, the history that you've kept. And it's so important for young guys coming through. When you do go through these journeys, keep a notebook, keep a scrapbook, keep that photograph, keep that program. I've still got my Selborne programs when I played against Robert Eberson. With Adidas we were sponsored by Adidas. A couple of balls from Russia when I played in a World Cup there, when there was 66 people in the stadium because we were playing a World Cup sevens in Russia. But I just wanted to say, honestly, I can't wait for a coffee in Cape Town, because just talking like this with real historians of the game, but people who are passionate, it's such a difference, Thanks, Gavin.
No, Jeff, thank you for that. Thank you. Very kind words from you. A lot of gratitude. And I'm not always right about things too. So we as I said earlier, we're learning all the time.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that you can provide people with a new thought process sometimes about certain things because of, or whatever it might be. And you guys are both you searches for new information, and thoughts and whatever it might be, whether it's picking a Springbok team or whatever it might be, and how did you prepare and what do you do here and how does that? So it's good to share, and I'm a great believer in that. So I love young people. I love spending time with young people. I love sharing things with them as well and giving my thoughts. But I always qualify it by saying, don't accept that everything I say is right or everything that I did is right, and don't be scared to question things. Ask why, or say you don't agree with that or whatever it might be. So in November, I'll just let my brain tickle over a little bit, and I'm going to tackle you when I see you about some of the things you've said today.
Perfect. That'll be great.
Yeah, I'm pulling your leg.
Perfect. Yeah, well, thanks again. We'll have you on again.
Okay.
Maybe after the end of your tour or something, and you can come on for a bit and share your thoughts. But it's been an absolute honor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Wonderful. See you soon.
Thanks,
Cheers.
guys.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.